How is everybody today? My name is UltimatDJz. This is Talking Trek Live. We are Star Trek Fleet Command's official podcast. But today, stepping outside of the video game world into the real Star Trek universe. Today's co-host is Bubba Joe. We've got special guests today, Dr. Erin MacDonald, astrophysicist and chief science consultant for Paramount Studios and the Star Trek universe. Is going to be very, very exciting. We're going to talk to her. Plus, we're coming up and actually having an opportunity to discuss the Section 31 movie, which I know Bubba Joe is extremely excited to talk about. So all of that is coming up here today. Let me go ahead and get you guys to start us off with a Talking Trek. Server sound off. You guys hit it. Where in the universe are you hailing from? If you're not from inside Star Trek Fleet Command, where are you from? What country are you from? Are you across the seas? Are you here in the United States? Let's take a look. Commander Taylor on 187, Candy White on 24, Keith on 49, Q on 22, Stryker on 49. We got Check on 84, Broken Wolf on 99, Don Zeno on 136, Galahad on 53, Engineer on 89. What's going on? Papa Smurf on 61, Wilson on 36, Lord Iscarin on 49, Darthblood on 17, Martok on 8. Mosher is on 181. Carissa on 61. Jace on 188. Stoffel hailing from Belgium. What's going on today on server 142? Thank you. Benny Hills Ghost on 42. Cruzito on 13. Trenzlor on 139. Bender the Robot on 51. V-Real on server 80. Nick on 178. Putz hanging out on server 45. Sherlock Holmes on server 27. We got Raj hanging out on 9. Dave Hart on 74. Kevin on 163. Stradalorian on 9. Derek on server 44. Rico on 55. Hero on 31. XXXX Bob on 142. Odysseus on 11. Wheels on server 40. Think Tank on 34. DJ Vlad on 11. Savage Darkness on 9. And man, that list is just going on and on. Yar on 26. Woodcannon on 35. Mosher on 181. Guys, I'm very, very excited to be with you here today. We've got the one and only Bubba Joe is back with us here today. What's going on, my good friend?
Howdy, howdy.
Howdy, howdy, howdy. We've got, we're very excited. What's going on, Vinny? How you doing, Vinny? Thank you very much. DJ Vlad for the resub on the channel. Thank you so very much. Appreciate that. Here, I'll turn on your resub for a second. Turn on those alerts there really quickly. Thank you, Papa Smurf, for the 100 kitty bitties. And you guys are just incredible. Thank you, guys. Oh, did I read your name twice? Daggone it. You know, Bubba, they haven't stopped. It's like a fun, silly little challenge they've got. All right, they're trying to
How many times they can get you to read their name?
Yeah, they confuse me. What's going on? Shut the hell up! All right, I should probably turn those off. And Delisha, thank you for your 100 kitty bitties. Barcelona on European 138, thank you very much. Cruzito says, is the good doctor live or is her interview pre-recorded? We taped this interview a couple of weeks ago, so correct. We'll be playing that back. But we've got commentary before and after. Bubba Joe is live. Bubba Joe, can you give us the date?
Today?
Yeah. Give us a date. That way everybody knows you're live.
February 16th.
February 16th. And the current time?
In your time zone, it is 3:34 p.m.
That's correct. All right, there you go. Can you hold up a picture of today's newspaper? No, I'm just kidding.
No.
Do you
They
actually
still sell newspapers?
Yeah, you're old enough to still get a newspaper. I believe it. All right.
I am not.
Yeah.
That is not how that works.
You clip the coupons out of the Sunday paper, okay? I know that you do.
I do not do that either.
Yeah, welcome. Jay says, it's the 17th here. You guys aren't live. That's true. It's the 17th somewhere. Thank you guys so very much for being here. My name is UltimatDJz. This is Bubba Joe. And this is our monthly edition of Talking Trek that steps outside of Fleet Command. This has become more and more fun and more anticipated by the community, Bubba Joe, really, truthfully, there's more to talk about in the Star Trek universe than just doing one show a month. I mean, really, we still haven't talked about Lower Decks.
Right now.
Yeah, right now, there's a lot. We haven't talked about Lower Decks, the final season there. We haven't talked about Tawny Newsome and her new project. We've got a lot to talk about with the cruise that's coming up. Section 31 is on the docket for today. And, of course, we've got Dr. Erin MacDonald, who is going to be here with us today. So I'm very, very excited. We've got a lot to talk about. And the community really enjoys this, Bubba. They really enjoy you coming back Moser says, we haven't talked about Lorca. You're right. Why would we ever do such a thing? So there's a lot that we can do. And the community, I know, really enjoys your return to the podcast here outside of Fleet Command as much as I do. It's always great to sit with you on the stage. It is my honor and privilege to have you back. So thank you so very, very much. Today, we've got a lot going on, and that's why we even started early today. Bubba sends me a message earlier and says, A, don't play country music. B says, what time do you want to start the show today? And I'm like, oh, maybe around 3 or 4 o'clock. He says, well, if we go 4, then, we've got a hard cap out. And even now it's 3:35. So we probably should get on with the stuff, right? Probably
we should
get on with the stuff because Bubba Joe is going to have to sit down and be wrong when it comes to Section 31. That will come up a little bit later.
That is not what's going to happen.
That will come up a little bit later. But we do have first our primary guest today, Dr. Erin MacDonald. She is an astrophysicist. She is canon. She has actually played characters in more than one Star Trek show and or series. Dr. Erin MacDonald is an astrophysicist who started out in the world of education, Bubba Joe, and then somehow through some weird series of events landed this opportunity with Paramount, where she says she is having the time of her life. She gets to actually still practice real science and stay plugged in with the scientific community, but now has a direct hand in writing and explaining some of the science that exists in today's Star Trek. More than not, some of the technobabble, but also making sure some of it makes sense, right? Like she wants, their goal is to make sure that Star Trek is as grounded in real science as possible. And so that is going to be a lot of what we talk about in the show today is what is the real science in Star Trek. And then Putz comes up towards the end of the interview and has a great segment with Dr. Erin about some of the technologies that we see in Star Trek and whether or not they're actually feasible in real life. This is a very, very cool show. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor and privilege to bring to you the wonderful and amazing Dr. Erin.
And then what's the swearing policy on this podcast?
What's going on, community? Listen, we're so very excited about what is happening here today, tonight. This is something that we have been working for a long time to try to put together. Scheduling and timing and holidays and all of this have been a part of this. And finally, we have gotten together with one of the most amazing people that I got to meet on Star Trek The Cruise last year. She is the astrophysicist science advisor to Paramount and to the Star Trek universe. In other words, if you hear technobabble, she's trying to make it as real as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor and privilege to welcome to the stage our very special guest, Dr. Erin MacDonald. Hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. That was such a kind introduction. I'm happy to be here.
Well, we are thrilled to have you here. I know Bubba Joe has been very, very excited about this. We have been working on this new form of our show, Dr. MacDonald. And by the way, I mentioned this to Bubba before we started. I said, when we were on the ship, she insisted everybody call her Dr. Erin. Are you good with Dr. Erin before we get started?
Erin is fine, actually. I don't mind if you just call me Erin. The Dr. Erin thing has kind of stuck because there have been so many Erins who are working on various Star Trek projects. But Erin is also totally, totally fine. I do not insist on the doctor at all.
Well, we appreciate that. Thank you very much. But Dr. Erin, you're right. It has stuck. It's like when we mention Dr. Erin on the show, everyone's like, okay, we're excited for Dr. Erin to come on. So, Bubba and I have spent some time really kind of diving into outside of Star Trek video gaming, Dr. Erin, and looking at the broader Star Trek universe. And that was when we kind of thought, you know what, we're going to start reaching out to some of these people that we met last year and talking about some of the most amazing stuff. Let me give the audience just a teeny tiny bit of background. How I met Dr. Erin was on Star Trek The Cruise 7. Last year, we were on the ship, and I got to be honest with you. I know that television shows and movies, they have consultants, but I had never had the privilege of really meeting one, much less speaking to somebody. And then I went to your lecture on the new JWST, and it was an incredible listen. I mean, I could have sat in there with you for hours. We had like 50 minutes to talk about how science has fundamentally changed over the last year. Tell us a little bit about what it was that you presented last year on the ship. It was fascinating to me.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's a fun one. So on the Star Trek cruise, what's so great about it is I get the opportunity to give actual science lectures. And I think this is something they realized, and unsurprisingly, that Star Trek fans really, really like real science. And there's a huge cross-section of that fandom. And so I give talks, and one of those is This Year in Space, where I go through kind of all the discoveries that we've seen in the prior year. And like you said, it's like 50 minutes tight. It's fast. It's the first thing in the morning, like usually the morning after the time change. So like rough time to get people to show up, but like people show up for it. And thank you for coming. But people are so excited to kind of hear about all this news. And honestly, like I have to caveat this with like, I haven't checked into where things are now within the last couple months on the JWST discoveries. But at the time, and I'm sure it's evolved a little bit, but at the time, the big exciting thing, which still is that the JWST, is kind of like our new Hubble, but it looks mostly like in the infrared and the optical wavelengths, but it's looking at really, really far, far, far away objects, which basically are looking back in time because it takes light time to reach us. And we have this theory of the Big Bang, and we've had various things that have given us evidence for that, such as the cosmic microwave background, the sort of residual heat from the universe cooling over time, and the sort of layout of our universe as we know it. And there are lots of great theories about how stars have formed out of that, how then galaxies formed, how galaxies merge, how they evolve, how we've ended up where we are now in the interim 14 billion years since the Big Bang. The JWST is looking back near this time, and they're realizing like there are whole galaxies formed that are much younger than they should be, in sense of like the Big Bang happened, you start to get like combination, it's called recombination, but it's really the first combination of protons and neutrons becoming hydrogen atoms, and then those all start to clump together to form stars, and then those stars all clump together to form galaxies without any shape or rhyme or reason. But then those galaxies, those mismatched galaxies, merge and they become spiral galaxies. And that all takes a lot of time to happen. And that's our current theory. But then the JWST, we're seeing these galaxies that are like old spiral galaxies that just should not exist as soon as they do after the beginning of the universe. That's the most abridged version I could get. I just threw a lot of science at you. So
and I love it so much because that is exactly the pace at which you had to deliver on the cruise. It was like, here's what we're seeing. And there were a couple of photos, and I hope I'll be able to throw one or two of these up on your screen, where you had shown that, like, for example, this XYZ galaxy literally disproves most of what we know about the age of our own galaxy. When you're talking about some of these galaxies that you got to see through JWST, is there a new estimate or even a new accepted age of the universe?
No, and that's at least nothing that has been widely accepted by the community, if that makes sense. And that's not to say that research that's being done that's challenging that right now, like, isn't valid. It's just, it's so ongoing. The academic scientific progress takes time. And so we're getting these images we can interpret, and they're publicly shared. And so scientists and experts are able to give their firsthand thoughts on it. Like you said, that maybe the universe is older than we think it is, or maybe the evolution model is quite wrong. But to formally introduce that as a scientific theory just takes time. Like, it has to be written up. It has to give all of its evidence. It has to be peer reviewed. It has to be published. And so it's going to be many years before we get to what's coming out of the JWST revolutionizing, where we can say definitively we've learned new things, and this has changed the way we think of our universe. But it's possible. It's heading in that direction.
Has the JWST disproven anything that we think we know about the universe?
Scientists are fairly hesitant to say like this is totally I don't think anything is like broken the laws of physics. I'll put it that way. Because the way astrophysics works, you're not able to like run experiments in a lab. You just have to take what the universe gives you, right? And so you get all this information, and then you have to apply our physics models to that. And if they don't match, you don't immediately just say, well, it's wrong, because you can't then go and test and, just say, well, this is disproven, so obviously it's all wrong. It's this, it's just sort of how the scientific community works, is that you need a lot of like contradicting evidence and explanations. And so everyone just kind of like takes a breath. And it's like, okay, even our knowledge of gravity has evolved over the hundreds of years since Newton, and has Newtonian gravity has been disproven. It's just that we have more accurate models now for how we think of gravity. And I think that's kind of what the JWST discoveries are going to do. They're challenging current models that we have, but there's nothing that's like destroying our knowledge of physics. And even if it was, scientists would take a beat.
We're still on the right path here. Okay, very good.
Yeah. And actually, if I can, like, I think the best example allegory I can give to this is the gravity thing, right? Because like Newtonian gravity worked so well to the extent that we still teach it. This is the whole, F equals ma, force equals the force of gravity equals like the Newtonian gravitational constant times the first mass times the second mass over the distance between them squared. We still teach that because it works. And it's an approximate model for what is true. But when astronomy started getting better, and in the 1800s, we started seeing things and we were visualizing where planets were and applying Newtonian gravity to the motion of the planets, Mercury did not fit. And that's kind of the equivalent of what we're doing right now with the JWST. Is it's just like, oh, Mercury's not behaving the way our physics understanding says it should. So what possible explanations could there be? And for a long time, they posited that there was another planet between the sun and Mercury, which was actually called planet Vulcan for all of us out there.
Yes.
On the star charts, there is a planet Vulcan in the 1800s between the sun and Mercury, because that was how they explained how Mercury's orbit behaved with Newtonian gravity. But then astronomy got better, and they knew where Vulcan should be, and it wasn't there. And so that's when like it really started to crumble. So that's this like cyclical, tricky relationship that astrophysics has as a science. That's the balance that you have to give, is you can only get what the universe gives you and how good your instruments are in order to prove or disprove whatever you're working on. It's fun. I think it's cool.
It sounds super neat. As a matter of fact, listen, Bubba can probably help you out. He actually came from Vulcan. All right, Bubba, he got here when he was about 13 years old. He's been here ever since.
New Vulcan. I'm from New Vulcan. I'm from Kelvinverse Vulcan.
Oh, that's wild. When I think about the wrapping my head around all that science has to offer, and then taking it and adapting it into Star Trek, which we're going to talk about here in just a couple of minutes. But it's crazy when you look even how Star Trek has kind of evolved in its technology and its understanding of physics and how the universe works. Have you seen since the original series up until now, which you're working on now, has there been a crazy shift in the way Star Trek tells science stories?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say Star Trek actually has really been careful of upholding a legacy of science. Like, even to the extent that in the original series, Gene Roddenberry was a fairly decently educated guy, but he, in LA, there's a big aerospace industry, and he had a lot of buddies that were working for, at the time, were the big aerospace companies. Raytheon being one of them that still exists today, but like Hughes Aerospace and all of those as well. And so he would run stuff by them. And in fact, it was one of these guys who recommended that it be called warp drive, not time warp drive, as he originally wrote it. And so they've always had like some little eye to the science and trying to make it accurate. But it is important to think, like, even back then when the original series aired, we hadn't even landed on the moon as humans. Like, one of my favorite examples is in the original series. I think it's the episode Tomorrow's Yesterday, but where they say that they've encountered a black star of high gravitational attraction that's thrown them back in time. That was said because they didn't even have the term black hole in academic language yet. Like, they're basically describing a black hole, but scientists didn't even use that as a term until like that same year was the first year that it was published as a term. And so it's really hard to like realize how old the original series is, and in the context of our scientific understanding of the universe around us.
Yeah, that's kind of wild when you think about how they have predicted, not predicted, they have created a lot of the sci-fi that has been upheld throughout a lot of Star Trek history, and it's not that crazy far off from what we get to actually learn about. And I never knew that he actually, so his first consultants were actually like NASA space people from these aerospace companies back in the day.
Yeah, it was less formal of an agreement. It was more like, hey, bro, you want to look at my script and tell me if this is wrong? But, you know,
hey,
but it's
bro,
still...
I'm sure that's exactly how it went.
Yeah, bro. Yeah, go check this out.
But yeah, I mean, just informal buddies. And I think, you know, I think it's been told too, like Asimov was like an informal consultant of just friends of Roddenberry that would give thoughts on scripts, you know. And so it's the same thing. He knew a lot of aerospace people, and that's how that carried on. So I do think the franchise has always tried to uphold that legacy of connections with science and scientists.
That certainly would speak to the fact that they have had consultants like you, for example, who have come in and we've actually talked about you and some of the examples you gave on the cruise last year. As a matter of fact, we do have, and I know that he's going to be back with us this year on the cruise, and I know that you guys did a lot of stuff together. But Dr. Mohammed Noor is going to be here on the show here in just I guess a month or two, I believe. I think right after this cruise, we're going to have him on. But you guys did a fascinating talk on how some of the science that you guys have pitched to the studios have made it into the show, but then other times they're like, yeah, no, that doesn't sound dramatic enough, right? Like, yeah. I know that you had a couple of examples of those. What is a time, tell us a story about a time where you made a suggestion regarding real science that both did get adopted, and then another time where they were like, yeah, okay, that's not dramatic enough.
I'll start with the second one first, because that's kind of the quickest, easiest example I can give. One of the things that is, you know, you kind of have a checklist as a science consultant of stuff that's commonly corrected, or, you know, my main job is to make sure we don't say anything wrong. And there's one little thing that is in our social vernacular that's really hard to break, which is being sucked into a black hole. Like, that's so hard. You don't get sucked into a black hole. It's a deep gravitational well that you fall into. It's hard to get out of, but you're just going to fall into it. But we all have this image of like black holes going around hoovering up everything in the universe, you know, and it's really just a steep gravity well. And that's fine. I'm not trying to make anyone feel dumb if that's kind of what they've used and said and thought about. But it's just a steep gravity well. But, you know, there was one Strange New World script. It was the Gorn episode in the first season. I think it was episode 6, where Spock says, like, he gives this whole explanation, and then he's like, we're being sucked into the black hole. And I remember like editing, I was like, oh no. And I gave that edit. And this is how it commonly goes, right? I'll see the script. I see something like that. I'll be like, you know, let's rephrase that. Like, Captain, we're falling into the black hole. Or I think he's explaining it to Lon. So it's like, well, we're falling into the black hole. But they wanted to keep it to be sucked in because they were trying to create the tension and the plot and the ticking timeline which isn't as effective when you say we're falling into something as in we're getting sucked into something. And the in-universe explanation for me that lets them get away with it is that he's quote unquote dumbing it down for La'an. Like Spock knows we're not getting sucked in. He's just using the social vernacular. But a lot is, society's used to hearing that, and you're also trying to create this tension. So that's one where I let it go.
Yeah, that was the one you shared with us on the cruise. The whole audience kind of erupted at that point because we actually do remember that scene. Like we've talked about that, we've seen it. It's on a very recent episode, and we look and we see that Spock is trying to, and Spock of all people, right? Like the most knowledgeable and the most scientific. It was. I mean, can you imagine, Bubba, for Spock to be delivering a dreadfully dramatic line and just say, "Oops, we tripped," right? We just fell in, instead of getting sucked in. So that was one. But there's also been a lot of modifications that you've made as the studio's consultant that has actually maintained an accuracy to the technobabble, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so many examples, but it really comes down to what my relationship is with the writers and how early I'm consulted and stuff. I think one of my favorite examples, I think I gave this on the cruise as well, was the in season 3 of Discovery, which was the one that Muhammad and I were both hired on to help with the science of the burn, and one other episode, which was the Seed Vault transporter accident episode. Where the guy is like glitching in and out in season 3 of Star Trek Discovery, and they have to reverse engineer what the cause is, and they realize that there was a coronal mass ejection from the sun that hit this space station and caused the issues. And that was one where the writer reached out to me and was like, "Hey, we need a space disaster that's going to screw up the transporter on this station. Like, what can we use?" I was like, coronal mass ejection, because we've used solar flares in the past before, but we've never said like specifically a coronal mass ejection, which is like a solar flare plus. Like, it's super dangerous. It's like it'll mess you up. And so they used that, and then we had a great scene where they were able to have Jet Reno basically give the whole explanation and be like, "It's a star burp. It's just a burp." And so working in that real science of a coronal mass ejection, but also a cool aspect that I think a lot of people don't realize about my job is not just coming up with the idea of a coronal mass ejection, but then the writer's like, "Okay, well, let's say that's what it is. How are these guys going to figure it out? Like, what data do they need? What might be a red herring? What do they need to narrow it down to that will make sense to people who know what that is?" And so you have to include the fact that they are scientists and they are sciencing and make it sound believable and realistic. And so that's a big part of the job as well.
Do you ever create technobabble, as in like the coronal mass ejection? Is that a real thing, or is that something that like you said, "Hey, all right, let's make this happen," and it's a combination of A, B, and C, and here, like you say, how are they going to solve it? Here's the science to get there, but like I want to make up a space phenomenon. Like, do you get to do that too?
I have very rarely, because there is so much technobabble in Star Trek already that I can play off of. But one that has now prevailed into a couple of shows, which I'm very proud of, is this idea of complex subatomic particles. This is a thing that I have completely made up. It started with the burn when I was sciencing dilithium, and I use this idea. So if you break down an atom, right, we're all kind of familiar with like the proton and neutron are at the middle, and then you have electrons that orbit it, and it, if that's all you remember, that's fine. But then you can break it down, and there's even more particles that make up what a proton or what a neutron are. We have quarks that make that up, and then you get even deeper into that, and there's things like gluons that are holding it all together. And these are what we call fundamental particles. And so the idea I had for how the burn would work was that, dilithium, which is a completely fictional Star Trek thing, that we've never really scienced. We've talked about how it works in warp drives, but we've never gone into like what tangibly dilithium is. in my sciencing of it, I was like, well, what if in the future we discover subatomic particles, so little particles that make up atoms, that tap into subspace, that live outside of our current space. And we have our current space, that's our trampoline of space-time or whatever, but these little particles live outside of it, but they can be intermixed with regular particles. And because I also have a degree in math and I'm a math person, I thought like, well, you could think about the complex plane, which is the real and imaginary. If people remember complex equations with little I, the square root of -1, we call those complex equations. So if you think of our universe as a complex plane of real space-time and then subspace or space outside of our regular time, that's our complex space-time. And I thought of complex subatomic particles, which now have made it into Discovery and the final episode of Lower Decks.
Yeah, that's your technobabble. That's incredible. Listen, you're talking about, I saw just a second ago, okay, and I don't know if you guys got to see this on screen. I guess it depends on the production. But Bubba Joe's like, yeah, no, I totally remember imaginary and plane, and like, yeah, I'm gonna hear it. I'm like, okay, I remember the little like the lowercase I. It was a
well, and I was thinking as she was describing this, I'm like, is that where this is going? Is complex particles being the imaginary with the real? And I'm like, that would be very cool if that's where this is going. So yep. I appreciate the science into the technobabble.
Yeah, and I think it was in episode 9. And I won't ruin anything with Lower Decks because I know it just came out, so people are still catching up. But I think at one time Mariner mentions complex gluons in the one of the engines that they're studying, and that's where that came from.
Nice,
very cool. Very
speaking cool. of Lower Decks and some of the newer properties, you had mentioned Strange New Worlds. There's also Prodigy. You have you not only advise Paramount and the writer studio when it comes to the technobabble and the science advising, but you have formed relationships, I guess, with all these people because they have incorporated your character into canon too, I might add. Dr. Erin MacDonald is canon, everybody. Yeah.
It's the dream. It came from a couple of different directions actually, where I guess where it started originally was in Prodigy, because we were creating the characters and I was brought in kind of early-ish into season 1. They had probably broken or at least had ideas for most of the episodes when I got involved, which was super early on. And they wanted help writing the character of Rock Talk because they wanted her to become like a scientist. They wanted that to be her journey. And so we talked a lot about like my own journey with science and a lot of like trips and falls in different directions that I took and all of the motivations that I had and what worked, what didn't, stumbling blocks that I'd hit along the way. And some of that kind of made its way into the character of Rock Talk. And so, at the end of the first season, excuse me, the showrunners, the Hageman brothers, were kind enough to just be like, well, Rock Talk has to meet Dr. Erin. Like this is the perfect universe all coming together. And so it was one of those things where I wasn't going to believe it until I saw it on the screen, and then it happened. and that was awesome. Great. Yeah.
Well, like you're canon now. Yeah.
Doesn't the character of Dr. Erin MacDonald also exist in the video game? Whether or not the video game's canon, I don't want to get into that discussion or not, but the character exists in the video game, right?
Yep. Yeah. So now we have, so I exist in Harry Kim's as a science officer on Harry Kim's ship in Star Trek Online in one of the episodes that came out last year. And very fun. I've lurked on the Reddit threads of the theories of what my origin story is. I hope to come back. I would love. In my mind, it's all one interconnected character. That's how I live it out. And I also was mentioned, you can barely hear it. It's like a little Easter egg. You really have to hunt for it, but it is there. It's easy if you listen on headphones. But the season 2 finale of Lower Decks, at one point, Shax shouts out when they all are like shouting why Kayshawn's idea is dumb. Shax shouts in that cacophony, Dr. Erin said we can't do that.
Yes, I knew that. See, Bubba, I said, I couldn't find evidence of that on the internet, Dr. Erin. I told Bubba, I said, I know there is a reference in Lower Decks. I can't find it. It's not credited. Like you can't search for it. I knew that was there.
Yeah. And it's been expanded as well into the comics because a good friend of mine, Mike Chen, wrote the Dog of War DS9 comic series. And at one point, Jadzia Dax is like, let me reach out to a friend of mine. And a thing comes in on her pad from Dr. Erin MacDonald at Daystrom Institute. So I'm friends with Jadzia. I'm friends with Dak, with Shax. This is all one universe. Yeah.
That is so phenomenal. I love that.
They should fit you in as a historical professor when they're doing Starfleet Academy.
Right,
the new show.
right. Thank you.
Listen,
Thank
for every property from now on. All right, listen, guys. You're in the chat. I need. What are the things you sign with signatures? Petition. That's how techno battle I am. I need a signature. Can I get a phone tablet and a chisel, please? I want to see Dr. Erin in like everything from now on. Do you just kind of in fun thought? Do you feel like your characters? You had mentioned they're all one character, but are they? Are they from the multiverse? Are they all from one timeline? Listen, Star Trek is really kind of starting to dive into the multiverse more than they have over the last several years. Like it seems to be a direction they're moving in. I bet you're working on those stories, right?
Yeah, a little bit. And certainly in my mind, because it's my own personal dream that it is me in the not so distant future, but like in the distant future, that has somehow Jillian tailored herself into Star Trek the future. Someone came along and picked me up, and I'm not upset about it. And then of course we have to add on, obviously that's how Captain Janeway and I are best friends, because that's in my head canon as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, are you excited? We're going to talk a little bit more about the boat coming up here a little bit because we got a little bit of time. But Kate Mulgrew is going to be on the ship this year.
Yes.
And is that not exciting? I have never had a chance to meet her. Have you ever met her?
I have. I've met her a handful of times. Some before I was even working on Star Trek, because I dedicated my PhD dissertation. So my PhD whole thesis thing. At the front, you put a whole bunch of acknowledgments to everyone who kind of helped you along the way. And some of them are goofy and whatever, but like the last acknowledgement I gave was to Captain Catherine Janeway, because she'll never know how much she got me through my PhD, which is so true. Like every time I wanted to quit my PhD, because I didn't have this like long-term goal of becoming a professor or anything. So I was so often like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? I would watch Voyager and just be like, I can't let Captain Janeway down. Like she would be so disappointed in me if I quit. And so I did that, and I was speaking at a convention again long before I was working with Star Trek, and she was going to be there. And so I brought my PhD thesis and I had her sign it. And then and that was a beautiful awkward moment because I froze and then she froze because I gave her a thesis. And she was like, hey, that's a big deal.
Ask for a photo or a coffee mug. And Dr. Erin's like, hey, here's my PhD thesis. Will you sign this? Do you still have that, right?
I do. Yes. Very precious to me.
You don't get rid of those things.
No. It's very precious. And I have also gotten Bill Nye the Science Guy to sign it, and I want the last person I need is Gillian Anderson to sign it, because Scully was also a big influence for me. So when I get those, that's my trifecta of science influences in my life.
So Erin, for the last 70 or so years, Star Trek has been the birthplace of modern technology, right? The original Star Trek, there was the communicator. Now we have cell phones. You have computers kind of getting their birth there, and then really turning into something that you can hold in the palm of your hand, which is very similar to something that we have like in the tricorder. Where do you see that we are going? Like, what is the next technology on the list that you think is, we're getting closer, we're getting there? Where do you think we can go, taking something from Star Trek and turning it into reality?
That's a great question. Honestly, I think where we're getting to soon is replicators. And I say that, yeah, like again, I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but I do
It's a good one to start with.
Yeah, like because even just in the last 10 years, the research in 3D printing and the availability of 3D printing, and in conjunction with that, the food science that's gone into like artificial foods, manufactured like impossible meat, the different molecules that make up the idea of red meat, like all of that has just had this huge resurgence in the last year or so. And the last couple of years. And so I think those two combined make replicators. And there are people who are working on those. Now, am I going to be able to walk up to a box in my lifetime and say, like, I want a burger and have it immediately give me one? Probably not. It might take 8 hours and be kind of crap. Yeah, cold and sad. And but I do like we are going to keep getting there. And so yeah, that's probably I think the sort of biggest stretch but potential lifetime thing
that's
we'll
cool.
It is a very good question, and the fact that you believe that it is a potential reality is kind of amazing, honestly, when you think about it, because if you look at the Star Trek timeline, they did not have replicators, Bubba, in Enterprise. And even Enterprise is still, what, a couple hundred years into the future, 100 and some, 180. I don't remember the
yeah,
time.
they got a chef on their ship. Yeah.
They have a cook. So there's not replicators there. It wasn't until you got closer to, the TOS era and the Discovery era that you actually had replicators that started showing up. And even then they were early technology. So
but we've outside of
moving that direction.
Outside of things like the transporter and warp drive, which are still obviously fiction to us, there's a lot of things, if you go back and look at the original series and even Enterprise, that our current technology surpasses what they showed on the show.
Yeah.
So we don't have to wait 100 years for that sort of thing. That's where we're coming.
Yeah, phones, what we're doing now, like that all was far future technology.
Robbie McNeil says that replicators make food out of poop. What are your comments on that?
Yeah, they absolutely do. Why would you waste good molecules?
Oh, no.
Now that's not all that your food is made out of, but you're gonna recycle. You're You're in space,
Garrett
man.
is gonna be so sad. Garrett, I tried, man. I tried to get the scientists to help us out. There's no way.
I know.
Can't be poop.
Mhm.
Oh,
So if you'll indulge me, DJ, Erin, what other projects do you have going on, either within Star Trek or outside of Star Trek?
Oh, thank you for asking. Yeah, I also work as a writer is my main thing. So I have actually written a good number of parts of the new Star Trek Adventures edition. They just came out with the second edition of the tabletop RPG Star Trek Adventures. They brought me on to help with a good number of those, and I've written some missions as well that you can search online. Just search for my name, and I have I think Disasters in Space is a free PDF. You can download some missions to go on with your Star Trek Adventures team. I've also written a baby board book called Star Trek: My First Book of Space. You can get for the little ones in your life.
I want to buy that immediately. I'm searching. I'm Googling that.
It's adorable. It's 11 pages. It's your introduction to space. All of the words are scientifically accurate, but there's a lot of Star Trek references in it, and the artwork is fantastic. It's not done by me. And then I also produce short films. So as part of my consulting, I started a company called Space Time Productions, which is a little on the nose, but I'm here for it and I love it. And I have supported a few of my friends that I've met through Star Trek. Before I started working in the entertainment industry, between academia and here, I was a project manager and a manager in the aerospace industry. So I worked as a modeling simulation engineer. And when I started working in the aerospace industry or in the entertainment industry, I saw film production and I was like, it's project management. It's easy. And realizing, that I had the skill set to get films made. It was basically like a producer is just someone that needs to run the train, just keep it going, hire the right people to get all the admin done, just enable creative people to tell their stories. So I've already made 2 short films. I made one with Mary Chieffo and her partner Maddie Goff, called Every Morning, which isn't distributed anywhere, but if anyone wants it, you can reach out and I'll send you the link for it. We're still deciding how we want to post it online, but it's done a whole festival run and it won a few awards. And actually Terry Farrell cameoed in that, so that was fun. Awesome. And then we just came out with another one called Identities, which was written and directed by Jesse Earl, who goes by Jesse Gender on YouTube. And it's available for streaming on Nebula. And we actually had John Delancey was in that film as well. And so I'm currently in pre-production on the next one, which I'm very excited for. I don't know if we'll have any Star Trek cameos in this one, but yeah, those are kind of the non-Star Trek things going on in my life, which I'm very excited for. So thank you.
That's phenomenal. I remember you talking about you premiered, or there was a sneak peek of the one you did with Mary Chieffo on the cruise this past year.
Yeah,
right?
we showed it. Yep. Yeah, we showed it. I think it was last year. Was it last year?
I think so.
Yeah, 2 years ago.
Because I was there. So and last year was my very first one. So I remember you talking about that, and that was great. And then you had sent us the one with John Delancey. I had an opportunity to watch that. That was, first of all, you say short films. What is the definition of a short film? And by the way, I'm not teasing because I don't know, but this was great. This was it was a full-length episode, if you would call it that. It was 46 minutes, and I was thoroughly enthralled. I called Bubba after the show, or after we watched it, and I was like, okay, I've got so many questions. He's like, save it.
That's awesome.
Enjoyed that. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about Identities, a little bit about the story. If you were going to tell someone that, hey, we want you guys to go and check this thing out, and we are going to try to help make this available to our audience. But what's the storyline? What's it about?
Yeah, so again, it's from the mind of Jesse Earl. I can't take credit for the story, but I can take credit for making it happen, which I'm very proud of. But thank you for watching it and being excited about it. I know Jesse would be like over the moon that people have questions and they want to know and they have ideas, but it's a very sci-fi concept where 2 people wake up in a room, and one is sort of male presenting, one's female presenting, and they don't know where they are, how they got there. So if people have watched Severance, it's very similar to sort of the opening of Severance of like, right room, where am I, how am I here? And we come to discover that these are basically avatars from a virtual reality environment of someone's first day at work. But something's up. These characters should know who they are. And basically you're just in avatar selection mode, as we all are when we kind of go through playing games and things. But these characters are autonomous and they are self-aware and they don't know what's happening. And so they are kind of investigating the world around them. And then they end up not wanting one or the other to survive, but glitch and become one person, one character, one non-binary character, and start to investigate and basically break the world around them. So it's called Identities, and it's a very sort of corporo, futuristic, cyberpunky sci-fi, and exploring the ideas of gender identity. But I think it's very applicable, and I think it's a great story that a lot of people just can relate to, and it's got cool sci-fi elements. And again, you get to see John Delancey as a cool, evil, futuristic tech overlord.
That was my number one question. Is John Delancey a bad guy? Because it sounded like he was kind of a bad guy, but then he might have just been the boss. Like, I don't know, but I mean, was he a bad guy?
Yeah.
Was the company actually bad, doing evil things? It sounded like it was just another routine day at work. And even the I guess the character that played the role of the manager having questions and even some memories of his life before as an avatar. It was very, very cool concept. I did really enjoy it. If somebody out there in the community wanted to watch this, and by the way, John Delancey, what a voiceover guy. I mean, his voice is
what a guy, man. What a guy.
He was on the ship last year too. He was great on the ship last year. As a matter of fact, let me ask you a little bit about the networking that happened. Like, were you able to get some of these projects worked on while we're on the ship, or was this stuff that you've done with 455 films, or because I know that Miss Facho is just all over the Star Trek universe as well. So tell me, how does not that I'm interested or anything, how does one just call up John Delancey and be like, hey, can you come be a bad guy for me?
No, I'm so grateful. One of, I'm gonna continue to name drop, so please forgive me. But also it's not gonna stop me from doing it. But just to give you the context, when I started on Star Trek, I had been doing fan conventions. I had worked on, I had done one cruise already, and I was speaking at conventions, but I had no formal association with the Star Trek franchise. They just invited me to give science talks. And so I had sort of tangentially met some of these actors through that, and we'd just seen each other's faces at events. That was sort of the level of knowledge that we had of each other. But when I was hired and we made the formal announcement that I was going to be sort of the in-house science consultant, my phone rang and freaking Jonathan Frakes is on the other side of the phone and just says Erin, it's Frakes. It's I just want to say I'm really yeah, he just wanted to welcome me into the Star Trek family. And I think that's something that when I've reached out to some of these actors, they do see fellow people who work in this franchise. We all know as fans, because I'm a fan. I was a fan before I started, and I continue to be one. But we know that this is a long-running franchise with all of its ups and downs, highs and lows, everything in between. But if you work in it, you're stuck with it, for better or worse. And there's a little bit of a bonding experience that goes on of just people knowing what that feels like. And so I think when I've had the opportunity, when I'm working on a project, even if it's just casually mentioned, some people show interest in it. Or if I reach out to them and say, hey, I'm doing this, it would be really great to have you involved. They can say no. I'm not guilting them into it. I'm not trapping them in a ballroom or anything, trying to get them to be in my film. But they want to support each other, and they especially want to support sort of the continuing generations of people, the next generations, if we were to say.
Hey, well done. That was a professional handoff right there.
Real quick, for those of you in the audience who want more information about identities, you can find some links down in the description below the video. We'll put up some information. If not, find a way directly to the film. Is the film out? Can somebody go find this? You said it was on a platform already, right?
Yes, it is on the streaming service called Nebula. And so so people can sign up. It's actually pretty cheap, even for the whole year. It mostly supports long form YouTube essayists. So that's where Jessie Gender has a lot of her videos. It's sort of an in-between platform between YouTube and Patreon. So a lot of these creators you'll have already seen, they still publish on YouTube and everything, but you get early access to their stuff. It's commercial free. I highly recommend it. There's a lot of great creators on there. Maggie Mayfish and Abigail Thorne are also big creators on YouTube that are also on Nebula and also in Identities. And so it's a nice little network of people. So people can go to nebula.tv, check it out. You can search for Identities, sign up and watch it there. And again, it's fairly affordable. I don't know what it is off the top of my head for the year, but it's fairly low compared to all the other streaming services we're paying for.
It was right. I mean, they have found a way just to bring all that back up, but it was a very, very fun watch. I encourage you guys to check that out. I've got a one or two more questions. I know we're closing in on time, and then I know Putz has sent me a DM. He is just dying. He was like, listen, this is all great, but I want to talk about black holes again. So we're gonna come back to that in a second. And I think Bubba's got a question or two. Listen, for people like me, go back in time 30 years ago, and I'm growing up with Star Trek, all right, and I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, I want to be like Data. That was my thing. I wanted to be Brent Spiner. That was he was easily my favorite character growing up. If and you said that you were in academia and not ever really looking at entertainment. The question is simply, what background or what trajectory did you take to become a part? If somebody wants to become a part of the Star Trek universe in your way, being a science nerd, how does that coalesce?
I mean, for me, it was really just the education aspect of it. So using Star Trek to teach science fiction and finding where that intersects. So using all of the references we have in Star Trek, because there are a lot of people who are fascinated by space and astronomy, but who don't have the access to learn more about it. You know, most of us never learn about space professionally. We don't really teach it at the high school level. It's not until you get to a university that you properly learn it. And so there's a big barrier of education for people, but there's a lot of science fiction fans, and science fiction is a great reference point when you're formally teaching science. And so that's kind of how I incorporated it. I think for anyone who wants to work in the entertainment industry as a consultant, you have to be a good educator. You have to be a good listener. You have to love reading. And you have to be like super flexible and fun and easy to work with. Because like I meet so many people who, like, bless them, I get it, you know, want to come in and be science advisors, but it's because they know all of the wrong things that have happened. And that's what they want to tell people. And that's not what the job is. The job is very creative, it's very collaborative. And so there's a lot of give and take, and there's a lot of flexibility that you got to be willing to do. There are lines, I've hit lines before, thankfully not with Star Trek, but or I'm just like, God be with you, man. I can't help you. Like, good luck.
His science is so bad.
but it's more of like finding out, because science fiction is a spectrum between science and fiction. Like, I'm also a heavy metal fan, right? And so like when you meet fellow heavy metal fans, the next question is always like, but what kind of heavy metal? Like, we could be into very different genres of music here. And it's the same with science fiction. There's hard science fiction, and then there's like fun, fluffy science fiction. And none of those are necessarily wrong. It's just about where shows want to land and how they want to explain science. And so finding where that line is and then being able to stay within that, I think, is the skill set.
What you've been with Star Trek now for a number of years. I think we just crossed over 5 years, right?
5 years.
So you've been here. You had mentioned you worked on the Burn, so that would be Discovery. What, season three? Yeah, season 3 of Discovery, and then you've been there all through Lower Decks, Picard, I presume, as well. Strange New World,
seasons
Prodigy.
2 and 3 of Picard. Yeah. So the only modern ones I have not worked on is easier to say now, which is Discovery 1 and 2, Picard 1, and Lower Decks 1. Everything else I've worked on. Yeah.
Oh, that's an incredible legacy. I mean, really, like, I don't mean to geek out about that, but like having you can watch a show and you're like, oh yeah, I remember talking about that. Like, they were gonna say this, but we got them to say that, right? Like, I bet that is. You're a big fan, so do you watch the Star Treks back? Like, you watch them live, and you're like, yeah, this is something I got to work on. Everything seems familiar. Yeah. What's it like watching your work back? A lot of people don't like watching their work.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem watching it. My husband, he is also big into science fiction and Star Trek, and he doesn't want any spoilers at all. So like, unless I'm like, I really need to vent about something, he doesn't want to hear anything. And so I watch it with him for the first time. And so there have been times where I'm like, did that make sense? How does that sound? Did that okay? Was that okay? But like, what's been fun is the animation stuff. That was so, like, the lead time between script and airing for animation is years. And so even like this last season of Lower Decks, I was just having a ball watching because I barely remembered. I didn't look up the scripts beforehand, and I was like almost experiencing it in real time, except I knew episode 9 was going to be special. So I did have a little watch party with friends for that one. So I was very excited about that one.
Well, before I hand off to Bubba for the final questions, I would like to ask, what we have a large portion of our community that are traveling to Miami here in about 40, gosh, not even so many days, that are going to be getting on this boat with us and sailing for 7 days, just celebrating our nerddom. For those people getting on this ship, I know that you have a talk or two planned this year. You want to give a little sneak peek as to what they would be looking forward to in a lecture from you and why they should absolutely put it on their calendar.
Yeah, thank you. I think for people who have been before, it'll be some of the same stuff, but I think what's great about that is some people sleep in and miss my talk one year so they can catch the next year. They do always change. I don't have my final formal schedule yet, so I don't know exactly what's going to be, but we're definitely going to do like this year in space again. So I'll go through again, kind of rapid fire, like the big highlights of the last year in space science, why it's important, why we care about it, what the implications are. Hopefully we'll do some stargazing. That, that's a bit hit or miss on a cruise ship, but it should be pretty fun. And at least I try to give, I think at the end of this year in space this year, I will give a little primer for like, if you're on the ship and you look out your window, like what to look for, even if you can't do stargazing or it doesn't work that night. I do some fun trivia things with Muhammad. People come in real prepared for that one. That's always stressful for us. It is science trivia.
Yeah.
People throw down.
Oh, let me tell you, I came to one of those last year and I was like, oh my God, I so don't belong here. I was there.
It intimidates me, man. Like,
I was there for the entertainment, and I'm like, oh God, I don't know anything. Like, how do you even spell that word? There was so much.
I concede that it's brutal. I concede that it's brutal, but we know that people have to win, and like, someone's got to win. Like, it can't be everyone. It's hard. I know it's hard. So it's fun, but like, you'll see me around the ship all the time. I'm available to answer questions. I do a lot of meetups, meet and greets, and so like, please come say hi. And yeah, I'm always happy to answer questions. If you see me around the ship, unless my husband, you will see if he's a former Marine. You'll see if he's taken me to somewhere I need to be. Otherwise, I am there to meet people and hang out. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, I can personally attest. She was so kind to me and Griffin, who were there last year. So incredibly kind to take time. It was actually after one of your lectures that you ended up spending like an extra 20 minutes with us. And it was really a fascinating talk. And what led to you being here today. Thank you so very, very much.
Exactly.
I really do appreciate that. Bubba, I know Putz is dying down here.
Yeah, I got one question, and then I'll take some time to talk science. I got one non-sciencey question. So
non-science. It's fine.
I'm going to go out on a limb and make a logical assessment that you are continued to be involved in all the Star Trek projects that are currently in development. Yes.
That's a fair assessment. I'm allowed to confirm that. Yes.
Okay. Is there, I don't want any of the details. I don't want any spoilers. Is there a particular thing coming up that you're like, I can't wait to see fans' reaction to this. I think this is really cool. Without, is it, is there something that you can say without saying anything?
I would say like without the CBS Eye of Sauron, like
right, exactly. Yeah. We don't want to get you. We don't want to get you in any trouble.
Like I will say this, like it's been announced the guest people who are going to be on Starfleet Academy. The two people I think I'm most excited, just personally and as a Star Trek fan. One is Paul freaking Giamatti. Like I've been a fan of his forever. I hope this is an opportunity for me to become best friends with him, which I know is exactly what's going to happen.
Yes.
Obviously. But yeah, I'm super excited for that. And then also having the Doctor come back just as a Voyager nerd, like he's going to be in Starfleet Academy. They've announced that, but like, I'm just really excited to see, even just as a fan, it's like, I read the scripts, but I don't get to see I don't see the dailies. I don't see final cuts or anything. And so like, I know he's coming. I know what he's going to say, but like, I think all of us are at least on the same page of just knowing he's going to be there, wanting to see him again as a character in live action. I think is just really exciting. So to see Bob Picardo back as the Doctor. So I'm really excited for that as well.
He is such a dynamic performer as well. Yeah. Last year, on the cruise, I watched most of what he did, and man, the guy has got it. He has got these singing chops. I mean, did you get to see that show when he was on stage?
He is talented. Yeah, they all are, man. And I think this year is Jeffrey Combs. Okay, Jeffrey Combs. He's on my list. I love Jeffrey Combs. He's going to be on the cruise ship again.
Him and Caitlin are
the two people that I most lose my mind around. And yeah, Jeffrey Combs is also incredibly, they're all talented, but like, don't miss his stuff either. Yeah, very, very good.
I think, have we been able to, is it confirmed that the Rat Pack is actually all going to be there this year?
I think. We'll see.
Think? But, yeah, that's a great show. If you guys have never seen it, that is that's a phenomenal show as well. All right, so Putz is dying. Listen, on the ship, we're going to be talking about.
I love you, man. Thank you for waiting here for as long as you have.
This year in space, right? That is one of the things that we're going to be talking about this year. So, Putz, What is it that Dr. Erin can tell us about this last year in space that you want to know? What happened with JWST in 2024, Putz? That you have questions.
What didn't happen? Really? I mean,
no, Putz.
Yeah.
Putz.
Your audio, it died.
Oh man.
You're good. You're good.
Got the
Can
camera.
you hear me? Test 1, test 2. Okay, good.
I got you.
Okay. Okay, so with the James Webb Telescope, I know that we talked about, is our galaxy this old? Is it that old? Do we know the age of the galaxy? But the biggest question that I have is, what new things have we learned about black holes? Is there anything new that we have learned that we didn't know, let's say, 2 years ago?
That's a great question. Yes. Lots of things. Our knowledge of black holes is increasing exponentially, I would say. We have not only, so a lot of people remember the first sort of image that we got from a black hole, where the worldwide telescope was able to sort of view a black hole and we could actually see the event horizon and we'd see the light falling into it. But we've been able to image our own black hole, which is at the center of our galaxy, our supermassive black hole. Also incredibly impressive. We have learned through gravitational waves. That's particularly what my degree was in. Gravitational wave mergers. So I've tried to limit how much science I throw at the situation. But we've talked about space-time, right? This idea of a bowling ball and a trampoline, that's sort of our idea of space-time and how gravity works, right? Gravitational waves are like, well, if the bowling ball explodes or if two bowling balls crash into each other, the trampoline is going to ripple. And those ripples we have now been able to detect. And those are ripples in space-time from catastrophic events that happen in space. They happen no matter what, but the catastrophic ones are the ones that we're able to detect. And they have not only first detected black holes colliding, but they have detected tons of black holes colliding. So the first one kind of made the news. And then they also detected a black hole and a neutron star colliding, which caused a short gamma ray burst, which proved the origin of short gamma ray bursts were from these collisions, which we always thought, but we needed proof on it. So that happened. But since then, LIGO, the collaboration that detects these, has found dozens of colliding black holes, which the reason that that's important is, like, we know black holes exist, but we'd only ever seen two forms of black holes, one being from when a star explodes and what's left behind from a massive star is this black hole, but we see the glow of material continuing to fall into that black hole in X-rays. And so we had seen those are called stellar mass black holes. And we'd seen objects rotate around the center of galaxies at high speeds, knowing that there's a supermassive black hole at the center of galaxies. And so those two were the types of black holes that we knew: supermassive black holes and stellar mass black holes. And there's this huge gap in between those of like hundreds of thousands of units of mass that we didn't know. And so this idea of the mass gap of black holes, because LIGO doesn't require seeing things to detect black holes, it operates on the movement of space-time. We have now filled that entire mass gap. So we've been able to see all of the different masses of black holes that are tens or hundreds of solar masses that previously, like, we knew had to be there. Like, they had to be there. We just had no proof that they existed. And so LIGO has helped us, like, actually see that now.
So what you're saying is we filled in the spectrum, if you will, of the mass spectrum of black holes, from the smallest that we can detect up to, our supermassive, Sagittarius A, right?
So yes, but only to a limit from what LIGO can detect. So LIGO can't detect like mergers of like thousands of solar masses. It's just not, because that's at a different frequency, but it's detected tens and hundreds of solar masses of black holes. So yeah, filling in that mass gap for sure.
Nice.
It previously was completely blank.
I have a question.
So here's
hold on.
Sorry.
So if we now, you're saying that time moves differently in a black hole, right? Yeah.
As you approach a black hole, as you fall into a black hole.
There you go. There you go.
Falling into a black hole. So have we ever been able to get data out of a black hole?
No, because all we do is we see the residual impacts of the black hole because the idea is if we want to see something in space, it either has to emit light or it has to reflect light or absorb light. So those are the three different ways. But basically a black hole, it has an escape velocity greater than the speed of light. So if you're to try to shine a flashlight onto a black hole, the little light particles are going to fall into it. They're going to bounce off whatever is there, but then they don't have enough speed to make it back out of the black hole for us to see what's there. And so that's why we can't see anything.
What exists inside a black hole?
We don't know.
No. Yeah, that's an easy one. So here's
volunteer as tribute. I want to go and check it out.
Yeah, he wants to be spaghetti. I get it. Yes. He wants to spaghettify himself.
Yeah.
So here's another question that I have my students ask me all the time, and I have never really gotten myself a good answer. So I'm gonna throw this at you. Okay. Space is three-dimensional, right? The Big Bang, it blew up in all different directions, right? My students will always ask me, well, I see this image of the Big Bang and the one explosion going this way and the one explosion going that way and the acceleration of the accretion, and then we also look at like maps of Star Trek and maps of galaxies and et cetera, and like where they are. And we seem to lose the third dimension all the time. Like there's left and right, there's forwards and backwards, but we don't seem to talk about up and down. So how would you explain what space really looks like and wrap it around like what we have seen in diagrams and drawings in our models?
Yeah, that's a great question. I remember when I was first teaching like the bowling ball and the trampoline idea of space-time, I had a student who like hated it, that he was just like, what's under the sheet? What's under the sheet?
That's the question I get. Well, I understand that, but what's on top, what's below? If it's ever, if we can look in all directions and see the CMB, the cosmic microwave background, right? Then So how do you differentiate that?
So one of the analogies that I like the best for the universe expansion and going back to like the CMB is, and you may have heard this too from teaching astronomy because it's a fairly common one, but is the raisin bread analogy. And I think that kind of helps students a little bit, which is where you all start at a single point, but imagine like if you are on a raisin in raisin bread that is rising and baking, and you're inside the bread, you're going to see all of the other raisins moving away from you, but you're not necessarily at the center of the bread. The other raisin is going to see all of them moving away from them, and the other one's going to see all of it moving away from them, which is like where we're at in space. And so like that image, and that's such a good, annoying question and like in a good way.
Sorry.
No, but like that cosmic microwave model, I know exactly which image you're talking about. That's in all the textbooks of like, you start here and then time progresses to the right and you see the universe expand. It's like, but it's expanding in all directions. But that's where it's like, I do actually feel like the raisin bread model is something that I center back to often just to be like, because I get confused. I think all of us who teach this stuff, you get these good questions and then you're like, oh man, how do I think about that? How do I visualize 4 dimensions?
So do you think that once we have a kind of, holographic, like 3-dimensional stuff that we can grab and move and imaging, do you think that our understanding and the general population will kind of understand space a little bit more with that and being able to like kind of inverse themselves?
I hope so. I think like I worked, let me look this up real quick because like I do absolutely agree. I think they're called PhET, P-H-E-T. Yeah,
I love PhET. I use PhET. PhET is my life.
Agreed. So like PhET was a University of Colorado, go Buffs, as my undergrad. They were it's basically a set I think it was or is, it's Flash or JavaScript or some simulations that allow students to play around with models in physics and chemistry and like all sorts of models. And I think you're absolutely right. I think the better, because those were like developed 20 years ago, right? And so like they've been around for a long time, but like our ability to code and visualize things have gotten better. And I absolutely agree with you. I think if students are able to tug and pull and tangibly play with some of these concepts, which is like where PhET came from, it helps them understand this a little bit better. But also science fiction helps, understand things too. I think it does provide a pretty decent reference point. At the very least, talking about like 3 dimensions, movement in space, the distances between things, like it's a good starting place for people. So yeah.
He wants some raisin bread. Well, this is my last question, and it's kind of be a little like rapid fire, but I know that we talked about just recently here, we talked about the replicators being, like the closest thing that might happen. Okay. I'm going to throw out, Star Trek terms, and I would like you to either give me, yes, it's going to happen, no, it cannot happen ever, or even it might be able to happen if we learn something new.
I'm with you. I love it.
Right.
Bring it on.
Okay, so the first one will be warp drive.
Possible, likely not in our lifetime, but physics says yes. We need to have huge advancements in our understanding of energy to get there.
Okay. Transporters.
Not physically possible with our current understanding of physics.
All you need is a Heisenberg compensator and you're set. I don't know what the Heisenberg compensator does. I can't build you one. That's all you need and you're set.
Yep.
Okay. Phasers or disruptors?
Ooh, possible, but not in the way. They exist now in the form of high-powered lasers that I don't want to stand in the beam of.
Right.
But yes, so like the physics is there, just not in the way that we visualize.
It's not pocket size, right? Not in your hand, right?
Exactly, and certainly nothing you would want near any reproductive organs.
Right.
Radiate a lot.
Okay, the holodeck.
Yes, possible, likely in our lifetime. I've put on VR. I know what's possible. We're gonna get there. I'm sure of it. Yeah.
Awesome. And the last one, time travel.
Oh, I want it to be possible so bad because that's how I become my Starfleet counterpart. But there are ways to manipulate the forward passage of time, but no way to go back in time, certainly. And unless we discover something like a wormhole or the ability to create a wormhole, which would pinch 2 points in space-time together, I don't think we're going to have time travel anytime soon. So.
You're right. Or maybe tachyons exist. Yeah, maybe tachyons exist.
Yes. I think that would be the interim step, right? Like with warp drive, we need to have advanced energy. We know there's more of a blueprint for warp drive. But if we discover tachyons, that's a game changer for time travel. If we discover tachyons, my answer on time travel would change.
Yeah, and if we discover tachyons, then all of Maxwell's equations get tossed out the window in
everything breaks.
Mechanics. So yeah,
everything breaks.
It would be really great, but also really awful,
including my brain right now.
Yeah, including my brain. Everything breaks if we find tachyons because we would for people who don't know what tachyons are, they are not just a Star Trek technobabble thing. They are actual theoretical particles that always travel faster than the speed of light, which breaks our entire understanding of causality, because if I flip a light switch, you wait for the electrons to travel and the light to turn on and then the light to reach my eyes. Tachyons would be like emitted before I flip the light switch because they travel faster than light, which is why it breaks everything. But we also see them. Star Trek uses tachyons very well because they always show up when there's time travel and stuff, because causality all breaks when tachyons arrive.
Timey-wimey
Timey-wimey nonsense. Yep. Timey-wimey nonsense. I love it.
I will say thank you for indulging me and letting me ask those questions. Thank you very much.
They were great questions. Thank you for being a teacher. Thank you for your patience while we all nerded out. You were so patient waiting to ask your questions. So I appreciate
I
it.
nerded out with you guys the whole time.
Thank you.
You know, I had mine just written down and was like, I'll get there eventually.
I love it. No, thank you. I really appreciate it. Those are great questions.
Community, we've been spending time with Dr. Erin MacDonald, actual like sci-fi guru, like the chief of scientific protocols inside the Star Trek universe. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. I know when I sent you that email, I got back your email and you were so excited. You were so kind. And thank you so much for spending the time here. Bubba, as we get ready to wrap up, this is exactly how I wanted this to be, is just to like see inside like what's going on when we see techno babble. Like now everybody who listens to this, everybody's going to be like, I wonder if Dr. Erin wrote that.
Yeah.
I wonder if that was a thing. All right. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you so much for spending time. Guys, links to a lot of stuff that we talked about is down there. Please go check out Identities. It was an amazing short film. That link and information is going to be down below. And just in case you're not going to be joining us in Miami this year, as we depart on Star Trek The Cruise, I am sure that we will see much more of Dr. Erin in the future. Hey, just throwing this out there. We're kind of having a little bit of a party on Saturday in Miami before we get on the boat, in case you and the hubby want to come by and nerd out.
I'll keep that in mind. Thank you. Yeah, let's do it. I love it.
Right.
We'll have so much time on the boat too. I can't wait. So
it's gonna be fun.
Looking forward to
guys. We've got more right after this. Thank you again to our very special guest. We'll be back right after these words here on Talking Trek. Hang on. All right. That was good stuff. That was good stuff. Oh man, the audio didn't chop over right. Oh well. Listen, we made it through like an hour and 20 minutes of I was afraid that things were going to crash and everything worked, which was amazing. Take a shot. Everybody, Bubba just drank from his cup. Take a shot. You know what? We left. There were so many yawns that didn't make it in. We did get one good yawn in there, but there was like at least 8 more. All right, there was a lot. So many yawns. Uh-oh. Why don't I have? There's Bubba.
No. You got me?
Yeah,
gotcha.
I
wasn't sure if you had muted me, so I muted myself because I was sneezing and coughing over here. So I'm like, I want to make sure I avoid any of that.
Yeah. The beard is different. We recorded this. What was the date? I don't remember. Was it about 3 weeks ago or 4? I don't remember exactly when we taped this thing. It was in
at least
January.
3 weeks ago.
Yeah, so about 3 weeks ago, we had Dr. Erin, and it was a lot of fun.
A month ago.
It might have been a little closer to 4. Yeah. Yes, and my hair has grown back. I had to wear the hat. I didn't have eyebrows. So there was some of that. Max says, great content. Thank you so very much. Stefan says 40 days to the cruise, and now we're 7 days out. So, yeah, probably was about 30 days ago then. Yeah, absolutely. Long enough for my eyebrows to grow back. So
that's assuming DJ knew how many days was till the cruise when we did the recording.
That's questionable.
The odds of that are not super high.
Questionable. But yeah, she is just absolutely phenomenal. Looking forward to hanging out with her. And at last check, she was still trying to arrange. Tarpy, she was still trying to arrange actually coming to hang out with us on Saturday. She was interested in doing so, just had to kind of work it out with a couple of other things. But we may, in fact, get to share drinks and have a meal with Dr. Erin at our Saturday get-together. So we're still working on that. We had mentioned Dr. Muhammad Noor, who will also be on the cruise and who has booked with us on the show, Bubba Joe. He is the chief biology consultant. So we've got the astrophysicist consultant, and then we're going to have the medical and biology consultant, Dr. Muhammad Noor, who will be on the show after the cruise, who's going to be talking to us about genetics and the forms of alien life that we see inside Star Trek? Why are most of them humanoid? Why have we seen so very few that are not humanoid? And does it have anything to do with the space seed or the progenitors and all this stuff? And he has actual lore and actual stories and medical science to back all that up. It is a phenomenal talk, and we're looking forward very, very much to having Dr. Noor on the show as well, because he's going to tell us why Bubba and the Gorn have so much in common. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Oh, I went there. I tried. Bubba, lots of fun there.
So hang on.
Yeah.
Are we talking TOS Gorn or Strange New Worlds Gorn?
Whichever one is.
Because I can probably handle TOS Gorn. You know.
Yeah, but
there's no way I'm pulling off the moves of the Strange New Worlds Gorn.
Could they have turned him human? I don't know. Anyway, listen, lots of good stuff. Dr. Erin likes a good whiskey, says Thumbelina, which we know is true as well. So should be a lot of fun, and really looking forward to seeing her here in about a week. I want to throw a couple of things up on screen before we move on to section 31. You guys were asking about the links and talking about Identities. Bubba, we watched Identities together before this interview. Yep. And this was a really, really cool short film. You heard me ask and mention the fact that it's a short film, but it's actually about 40 minutes long. So I guess, yeah, but like an actual episode, 40 minutes of this content, which was super interesting and had some very interesting characters. And John Delancey was in here. Not throwing any spoilers out yet, like we didn't during the show, but you guys should definitely go and check out Identities. It was kind of a fascinating watch from this perspective. Bubba, if you were describing what you had watched during this film, what was that? Some of the stuff that it kind of raised questions about, or some of the curiosities you had about the film?
Gee, I don't know. I don't want to color anyone's perception of what this film is. So I think it's just better to let people watch it. I mean, I think the description that was in our interview of it being you wake up in and you are trying to recall your identity in kind of a corporate isolation situation. And I think I think if you give any more away, you're kind of trying to color someone into one sort of way or another. I think just letting people discover for them there's a lot of layered themes to what goes on in this film. And I think that's important for people to discover themselves.
It was, I agree. I mean, as far as what you're going to take out of it, the original perception that I had when we first saw them wake up, right? And we first saw them kind of come to life, if you will, in this room. I looked at it almost differently, probably not as the writer intended, but maybe kind of, right? Like from inside the technology world, as if technology, and I know that this is not 100% with what they went with, right? Because of the whole employer function and all this, but I also kind of approach that, Bubba, from, if technology was sentient, okay, and obviously this is a stretch, but like, when you open a game, you create an avatar, right?
You think your technology isn't sentient now?
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like when you open a game, you create an avatar, you choose your character, so to speak. I thought this could have really actually been that perspective. They used it in a workplace environment, which is fine, but this really was the perception or the perspective of that avatar, like customizing that avatar, choosing that avatar, wanting to be the final avatar, so to speak. I don't know. I looked at it slightly different in that way.
Well, I think that our perceptions, yours and mine, are altering that, right? So I have worked for 2 very large corporations that require a very they reward a very narrow perception of what people should be if they want to advance.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a corporate structure. That is what big corporations will do. There are people that can advance outside of that, but you are setting up, this is the person I want to be represented as within my work entity. Outside of work, maybe you're doing podcasts, maybe you're doing something else, but within work, the work structure, you are setting up an avatar just like you do in a game.
Yeah.
And that avatar is real life, right? That avatar is the person that people see and walk up to your desk and I think that your job is very different than that of what I'm doing. And it's not to say that what you're doing is bad or worse or lesser. It's just a car dealership is very different from a very structured office job.
Yeah. Yeah. Q says, reminds me of the movie with Bruce Willis called Surrogate. Putz says Ready Player One from the perspective of the avatar. And there are some things like that, some tones in there. And even then, the reason that I kind of brought up the perspective of the avatar is because there's a survivability instinct there as well, right? Not just the choice of the office worker with the avatar, but also the avatar wanting to survive, the avatar wanting to be chosen. So it was actually super cool. And you can find that now on nebula.tv. All right. Nebula.tv, which, crazy enough, I had never even heard of, Bubba Joe, until Dr. Erin told us about it. It is incredibly inexpensive. It's as little as $3 a month. You can subscribe for a monthly basis at $6 on the month, or you can buy an entire year for $36. Think of that, Bubba Joe. You could literally buy 3 years of content on this platform for the price of one Prime. Oh, sorry, that was a bad joke. But
Amazon Prime? What are you talking about?
Yeah, a little cheaper than Amazon Prime even. But nonetheless, going on to nebula.tv and finding this film, and you can see it right here, Bubba Joe. She was the producer. Erin MacDonald listed right there in the credits. She got to work on that. John Delancey was an amazing character in this film, and it really was. His voiceover it wasn't just voiceover. I mean, he was there. He was in it. But his voice is just so commanding, and it does. She didn't answer this question in the interview. And so this is another one, Bubba, that I would love for the community to provide their perspective on when they come back is he a bad guy? Because he played that role really well. The best roles are played when, I've said this before, the best bad guys don't necessarily believe they're bad guys or don't think that they are a bad guy. This particular appearance by John Delancey really makes you wonder, like, is this a bad guy? Is this a dark, shady corporation?
Why does there need to be a bad guy?
I'm not saying that there does need to be. My head goes to, is this like an evil corporation or not? Is this just a normal everyday job? So he played that character really, really well, because there was some tone of shady, evil CEO corporate, kind of thing. And then it could have just been like, that's a boss. So I don't know. But very, very interesting film. You guys should go check that out.
Interesting that your mind goes, is this evil?
Yeah.
Like your mind just goes there. Does it go there when building an avatar? Is this evil?
Yeah. Well, listen, is it evil? Is the avatar going to just suddenly
your mind doesn't go,
be an axe
is
murderer?
This good? It goes, is this evil? I think that says something about you, DJ.
There's a dark underbelly here. All right. The other thing that was super, super cool that she brought up during the show, and I have not actually ordered this, but I do want to share it with you guys, is My First Book of Space. My First Book of Space, the book that Dr. Erin wrote. It is available on your screen. I'll put the link in the Discord chat as well over in the graphics room. Oops, wrong button there. Yeah, I'm going to where do I click to share the product? Oh, there it is. Share, right, copy link. Yeah, got it. I'll put this in the graphics room as well, and you guys have it here in the chat. Yeah, we should get this for baby Jules. My First Book of Space, written by Dr. Erin MacDonald and illustrated by Jason Kaiser. This is very, very cute. You take a look. Like, the artwork is great. All right. But yeah, My Very First Book of Space, an actual Star Trek book from Dr. Erin MacDonald. You guys can check that out as well. Super, super cool. And it is available on Amazon for $11. $11. Retrieving says that we need to buy that for baby Jules. Absolutely. Be a great little sciencey gift there for a young child. All right. Putt says, put this book on the throne list for Jules. I'll do that. It won't last very long, but I'll put it on there. So lots of fun. That was absolutely incredible, and really loved having her on the show. Just so cool. Bubba, as we get ready to wrap up on this particular segment before we move on, and I'm probably not going to take a break. We had to take I sent Twitch to a break during that show because it ended up being longer than an hour, but we've got to get into. We've only got about 40 minutes left to talk about Section 31, so I want to do that. But as we get ready to wrap up on this segment from Dr. Erin, any final thoughts or lasting commentary on that particular piece of content as it pertains to either what we talked about or even the future of this show? I think that I am so grateful to her for being the first to come on the stage. I think it's going to open the door.
I really hope so. I think that it was a fantastic interview. She seemed very, very likable. She seemed to really enjoy talking to us. If we can ever get you to actually adhere to the timeline that the people want us to interview them in, I think we actually could have something.
Listen, we stuck to that one. As a matter of fact, scheduling on this one.
Didn't.
Yes, no, scheduling.
No.
What? Scheduling on this went fine.
She asked to limit it to an hour. We went a full 75 to 80.
It was an hour and 15 minutes, and she was fine. Yes. She was fine.
She was, but we need to be more professional about respecting people's time.
That's
if
fair.
We are going to continue to do this.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But it was great. She was absolutely phenomenal. We had spent a couple of minutes with her before and after. The outtake that Griffin put at the very beginning was actually really funny because that was legit. She was serious. She was like, can I come on here and be filthy, or do we need to be family friendly? And that was where he cut it in.
Say filthy.
Yeah. What's the swearing policy?
You can't say someone's going to be filthy when they asked about swear words. There is a difference. DJ, context.
I thought it was great. All right. I thought it was, and it was actually a really cute little peek into her personality because she is so much fun. She is so much fun to hang out with. And for those of you going on the cruise, you'll definitely get a chance to experience that. But she's so much fun. That's right. She asked for the swear policy. She did. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's transition. Bubba Joe, I know that you and I have been gearing up for this. We have been talking about the new Section 31 movie, and you have not been a very big fan of what ended up coming out. I have taken a slightly different position.
Liberty Mutual.
Shocking.
Sorry about that. I have taken a slightly. Sorry, I know that you didn't hear that. That just came across on the stream a little bit because I was actually getting ready to pull up some theme music. All right, as we get ready to talk about this. But you had talked a little bit about why is it not working right? Jeez. Anyway, I have been more forgiving of this film than you have been. Okay, yeah, that wasn't supposed to happen. All right. I have been more forgiving of this film than you have been. Tell me why. Let's start with our original first reactions.
Okay.
I feel like that's not the right theme song either. All right, we're just going to let that go. I was trying to do something cool and thematic. It's not going to work. Bubba Joe, Section 31, thumbs up, thumbs down, and why?
Going into Section 31, you and I had talked about how this could be kind of a Star Trek-themed action movie, right? That could have been what this was. And I was in. I watched it. I watched how the movie started, right? And in the introduction of the characters, and okay, well, we're going to get this plan. We've got to intercept this weapon. I'm on board with all of that. And then the first thing, they fail, right? Their first cut at this doesn't work. Fine. And then the movie takes a hard left or right away from the actual point of the movie in a way that was not well acted, not well written, and just not very interesting.
All right, let me I want to dive into that though. Hang on. You say no, I don't mean to interrupt. I want to expand on that. You said that they started off with this objective, which they failed. That was obviously securing the weapon, right?
Yep.
So
yep.
up until this point, you're okay.
All the stuff that takes place on the bar. So I'm seeing this comment in the chat. I fell asleep after the bar scene. Do I need to rewatch it? You can skip until the final fight scene and have missed nothing of relevance.
That is
you
not
can skip
true.
the next 55 minutes.
No.
And you're fine.
All right. That is I know that I stand alone on this. All right. And it's not just in this community. The entire Star Trek universe fandom as a whole has been very outspoken about how much they did not like this film. I'm sure that Michelle Yeoh is disappointed. I'm sure that Paramount is disappointed. I'm sure that everybody who was involved in this is disappointed with how it was received. That all being said, I cannot be the only person who is a Star Trek fan that says, okay, this was never going to be a Star Trek movie. Like, I can't be the only one.
It doesn't need to be a Star Trek movie. This is where you and I disagree, right? So, like, you're coming at this from this perspective that is not my point of view. Now, if you want to try and defend yourself from the abstract chat that is like, it wasn't a Star Trek movie, it's bad, that's fine. That's not my position. I'm saying the middle 2/3 of the movie, okay, the middle 60% of the movie is unwatchable. It's a terrible story arc. Like, the characters, their actions don't make any sense. And then, like, all of a sudden, we get to the very end where they're chasing the ship and trying to retrieve the weapon before it can be, and I won't spoil, before it can be delivered, okay? And so that starts off this action sequence that's fun. The action sequence is fun. And the bar scene, the action sequence in the bar to start off the movie is fun. It's everything in between those two parts that is terrible.
God, you're so mean. All right. So there are a couple of things that I'm going to agree with you on. Okay. The dialogue, for one. I felt that was forced and odd at many times. Okay. I when we're talking about certain pieces of this, you talk about the writing. All right. You say poorly acted. I don't know that I can get on board with that. I mean, the lead character from Section 31, I mean, whether or not these were highly, A-list actors and actresses, that may or may not be up for debate. But I don't see any evidence of any of these characters being poorly acted, you mentioned.
I don't blame any of that on the actors and actresses.
So what do you mean by
blame
poorly
for that falls
acted?
Squarely on the director.
So what do you mean by poorly acted?
What I mean is that when they are doing things like when they are doing exposition, because there's a lot of exposition in this action movie. When they're doing exposition, they're not given anything. They're not given anything to work around. They're not given things to manipulate. They're not giving anything to interact with each other. It's like each of them did their scenes isolated on a green screen stage. Now, this is something that a lot of sci-fi movies suffer from. If you go back and watch Star Wars episodes 2 and 3, if you used to watch some of the modern Star Trek movies where there's a lot of green screen activity, the actors have trouble interacting with other things. Now, usually they're with each other, and it seems like that might have been the case here, but they directed it as if they didn't have to interact with each other. Like, they didn't have to do anything. It's like we're isolated on each one of these. And that's a direction problem. Like, so that's a direction and a writing problem more than an actor problem.
You're referring to their interaction with each other.
But it is an acting issue, right? They're not acting with anything. So if you want to semantics and say, I don't think the actors were at fault, I agree with you. I don't think the actors were at fault either. I think these people, we could see them in another project and they're going to be perfectly fine. I don't think we certainly know that the lead, she's fantastic in everything that she does. So we know she has chops.
Sure.
So I don't have a problem with the actors and actresses themselves. I have a problem with what they were being asked to do was really poorly thought out. And I think suffers from the fact that this started and stopped and was a series and then a movie and then a series and then a movie. And they had to, and then now it's like, well, now we're running out of time because we have to do it in this window. I think it suffered from all of that confusion of trying to figure out what this is going to be.
Do you feel that...
Yes.
Do you feel that this movie suffered a change of direction halfway through? Like, do you think that this movie would have been better as a television show, and did they not adapt hard enough?
I think the premise works better as a television show. I think that you can do a movie to kick off a television show, but this was not going to be that movie.
Well, no. I mean, obviously, the movie was a byproduct. All right, we've talked about this in the past from some of what we had learned from inside Paramount, is that it was always supposed to be a television show. All right, this was going to be a pilot. This was going to be a television show, a series, at least 3 seasons. All right, and then the strike got in the way, COVID got in the way, time was lost. And the amount of time that they had left with their star power, specifically being Michelle Yeoh, was coming to a close. They did not have time to make a television show out of this with the commitment that they had from Michelle Yeoh. And then, of course, and this is an opinion piece, but Paramount has never been great at paying their talent the premium rates. Okay, they're just not. We look at the Kelvin Star Trek series, Bubba Joe. Obviously, Trek 3 had some difficulties in the way it was presented, but literally all of that cast said that they would come back. There was money issues. You had money issues there with Chris Pine. You had money issues there with Chris. Liam Helmsworth. Thor. You had problems there with Thor. Okay. Chris Hemsworth. Thank you.
Chris.
Yeah, still Chris Hemsworth. All right. But you had money problems there. Okay. So to find out that Paramount was not willing, that they were working under the gun to produce something with Michelle Yeoh before they would have had to have paid her more money, doesn't surprise me, because they've never been good at that. Okay? They have never been good at that.
I think that that's speculation. I don't think that that's actual fact. I think that Star Trek 4 has had a number of issues. The reason that we don't have a 4th Star Trek movie has to do with trying to get, like, these are very popular actors that are doing other movies, and trying to get them into that schedule is difficult, right?
We've had 10 years.
Star Trek is not the priority. Huh?
We've had 10 years to put that together.
Yes, and they had a director, and then they lose the director, and they had a writer, and they lose the writer. All the while, they're trying to negotiate with the actors as well. So if they wanted to do Star Trek 4, I don't think that money is the issue. I just don't know that they know what they want to do with Star Trek. Like, that's the problem that we've always had.
Yeah.
Is they almost let Star Trek die for the longest time, and then they came up with something that was met with some positive and it's like Star Trek 3, the new Star Trek 3 was met with both, this movie is fun, but the Star Trek fans like rebelled against it. So now, are we going to do a Star Trek 4? Is that the right solution? Do we relaunch the movie franchise into something else? Do we take the movies in a different direction? And so, to me, this doesn't scream money issue, although we know that Paramount is trying to be bought or sold or move on to something else. There are obviously other issues there that are business issues. But to me, this screams of they don't even know what they want to do with the Star Trek movie franchise. And while I'm disappointed by that, it's not surprising because of the reaction that some of those movies have been and the extreme opinions of people in the Star Trek community, which is not just Star Trek, it's in every community. But like, if it's not the exact thing I want,
yes,
it's terrible.
I know.
The extremism that's going on in the world, not just in Star Trek, but in the world, is a problem, because nothing can be, I like parts of this. If it's not this exact little thing that I want, it's awful and horrible. That has to stop, right? That has to be different.
Absolutely.
We can't live like that. And so studios are left with trying to figure out what it is that we want. And you see this in Disney, you see this in other universes. It's like, well, do we give them more content? Do we give them more of what they say they like? And then, oh, well, it didn't do as well. Or do we try and give them new things? Like, are we getting new movies out of Disney, or are we getting Moana 2? Or we're getting Moana 2 and Frozen 4. And because people are giving them that direction of, I want what was good before, and I don't want to support things that are new. happens in lots of different franchises. So Star Trek and Paramount specifically does not know what it is that they want to do to try and help their franchise that they own, one of their biggest franchises that they have. And so I think that's the real problem. It's not that I'm sure that there is a perception that, they're not paying people. And I think that perception exists everywhere. But the real problem is that when they started on this, Zoe was not as big as she is now. Chris Pine is not as big as he is now. Even the doctor who, had done Lord of the Rings and not much else, he's bigger now because of The Boys and other things. So their cast is much bigger now than when that movie started. So there is going to be a little bit of, you may have to pay these people a little bit more than you did the first time. There's going to be, you may have to promote this person as a bigger deal than they were because of where they are in the industry. And that may not blend with the story, right? Like, and this is, again, I don't want anyone to interpret this differently. If you have a Star Trek movie that has Kirk and Spock in it, right? How do you make it not about Kirk and Spock? Arguably, if they were to bring that cast back, Uhura should be the ace. She is obviously, in my opinion, at the peak of her career compared to everyone else in that cast. So now, how do you make that okay, right? Even though the story is still probably going to be about Kirk and Spock, right? How do you make that still a key part of the... So those are the things you have to kind of manipulate around, because all of these actors are at different levels in their career over the last 10 years.
Do you feel, though, and this is purely speculation at this point, we've seen the interviews with Zoe Saldana, we've seen the interviews with Chris Pine, even Chris Hemsworth, who was a minuscule part of Star Trek 1. As a matter of fact, who was
nothing when that movie launched.
You could absolutely do Star Trek 4 without Chris Hemsworth. Just because he is a part of the conversation is only because the theories or the alleged script, the story for Star Trek 4, apparently revolved around Kirk's dad. Okay? Now, whether or not that's true, we don't know. We've never seen a script. And it doesn't have to be. You could totally abandon that idea. Chris Hemsworth does not have to be a part of Star Trek 4. I think that it would be great for the franchise to have Chris Hemsworth back, but it doesn't have to happen. What you have to have are your bridge crew, okay? And obviously, having Anton not be a part of this is a huge problem, okay? I think that even that, given that this is a different timeline, could be honorably and respectfully done. Okay, I definitely don't think
wasn't in 3.
I don't think you recast this thing, huh?
He wasn't in 3.
He wasn't?
I'm 99% certain.
Well, either way, I mean, there's ways that this can be done and manipulated around the real world facts. And so this is why I ask, speculation wise, coming back, do you think that Zoe Saldana, for example, is going to come in and say, I have to be the headliner? I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that any of this cast is not going to work together.
So hang on, DJ. So do you understand how actors and actresses get recognized and paid?
No, not 1,000%.
Okay, so actors and actresses get paid based on the awards that they've won. Okay.
Well, yeah, I knew that.
If they are
but
on
I
movies
also know,
that are absolutely enormous, right?
Sure,
if
but I know that there's like a casting
movie and you were the
thing, right?
headliner for that movie, even if you won no awards, you may get paid based on that ability, right?
Sure.
But for the most part, when you've won an Academy Award or some of the some of the lesser awards, you get top billing. You get more money. Like, that's how the industry works, right? And so I think you have to consider that, right? You have to consider that where these people are at. Like, she would either have to have top billing or special billing, right? Because of where she has relatives. And that's fine. But that requires special attention. That requires taking a very special tact as far as building a story, right? Maybe the old story doesn't work, or maybe it does. You have to consider all of that when you are casting. Oh, I'm going to cast Samuel L. Jackson as a bit part, and a bunch of nobodies, right? I want to cast Samuel L. Jackson and a bunch of people that this is their first movie. Well, Samuel L. Jackson has been in how many billion-dollar movies?
Sure.
More than a handful, right? Even if he's only going to have 4 lines in that movie, that's going to call attention to the fact that this major actor who has won all these awards and been a part of all these huge franchises is a big deal.
I agree and I understand, but okay, Dr. Erin mentioned this in the interview. All right. I also believe that there are passion projects that these people will work on. If the movie has to be about Kirk and Spock, all right, Zoe Saldana is not going to come in if she returns, which she's indicated that she would want to. I don't see her coming back in and being like, oh, well, you know, XYZ has to happen. Like, you know, I feel like this cast, and I could be wrong, I feel like this cast just wants to come back and do another Trek film. All right. I don't suggest that they're going to do it for free. All right. But I do suggest that they are more than capable or more than willing to come in and do a project. For example, John Delancey for Dr. Erin's film, she said, hey, listen, I would love for you to be a part of this. No pressure, you know, but I would love for you to be a part of this. And obviously, a small independent, you know, short film is not the caliber of film that John Delancey would be in, but he chose to do that.
All right. So let me give you an example. Okay. Are you aware of the movie Much Ado About Nothing?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Okay, so so Much Ado About Nothing is a play, which you may have heard of. I think it's Shakespeare, but there was a movie done on basically no budget at, I believe, Joss Whedon's house. Okay, filmed a movie, released it in theaters with all of the people that have worked on Joss Whedon projects. You know, people from some of the Avengers movies, people from Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel, people from some of the other projects he's worked on, which are escaping me at the moment. But anyway, they filmed this movie for basically nothing and then released it to theaters, right? A project like that is going to get people to say, hey, I'll donate a couple of days of my time. Let's have some fun. I did this thing that was cool in school. Let's go do it again. Let's go and reenact it. Let's have some fun. Just like during COVID, there was the actors that did the reenactment of The Princess Bride. You may have seen that on YouTube.
Yeah.
That was, nobody got any money for that. They earned a lot of money and they gave it to charity. That is something that can happen. What can't happen is a studio going, we want to do a Star Trek movie, and it's a Star Trek movie, not some artsy film, not some film where we're going to donate all the proceeds to charity.
Yeah.
It is a franchise-defining film. You're not going to get people to go, yeah, I'll do that because it sounds like fun. You have to as a studio. No, but I don't know that they're not. That's the thing, is you're making this assumption that they're not, or they're not willing to pay, or something along those lines. And I don't know that that's the case. I don't have any evidence that the thing that is holding up Star Trek 4 is money. To me, from the outside that I've read, what is holding up Star Trek 4 is a lack of whether they want to do it or not. Is this the correct direction for Star Trek? Or, and this is actually probably pretty smart, is Star Trek better episodic?
Well,
is Star Trek better as an episodic series instead of a movie series?
Well, Section 31 certainly seems to answer that question with at least the powers that be at the helm and making the decisions right now. Section 31, starting as a television series and then being rushed into production as a movie, certainly left fans dissatisfied. What ended up happening was a huge revolt and a cry out from the fan base all across the country saying, this is the worst Star Trek film that they've ever seen. Yet, it boasts of a decent cast. You had... let's talk about that for a second.
Okay. Let's talk about that for just a second. Do you believe it is the worst Star Trek film you've ever seen?
No, I don't.
I don't either.
Okay.
It's not the worst Star Trek film I've ever seen. So how many Star Trek? We had 10 and 3.
Oh, gosh.
We'll say is this the 14th Star Trek film? Is that what we want to say? Do we have 14? Is that correct? So we have 6, and then we have Generations, First Contact.
You guys are terrible in the chat.
And Nemesis. That's 4, so that's 10. There are 3 Kelvin Universe movies. And then there's this one. Am I missing a movie? Am I missing
I'm checking all of them now. You counted Generations, right? Because I don't think it had a number.
Well, so there's 6 from the original series. There's 4 in the Generations universe, right? The Next Generation universe, and then there's 3 from Kelvin. That's the right.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I could get behind that.
There are 13 Star Trek films.
You
this
forgot
is the 14th Star Trek film.
You forgot Galaxy Quest.
I did not.
All right. So the chat is doubling down
let's
here.
Let's put some categories. Let's divide this into 3, right?
Okay.
So let's say there's a top 5, a middle 4, or a middle 5, and a bottom 4. Okay, so there's less worse. So a bottom 4, a middle 5, and a top 5. Okay.
Okay.
Is this in the top 5 for you?
No, it's not in the top 5.
Is it in the middle 5 for you?
I mean, no. It's in the
Okay. Okay, so it's in
Bubba,
the bottom
you're trapping
4. Okay,
me.
so I
It's
agree.
not the worst.
I agree with you. Is it the bottom? Is it the worst?
It's not the worst, but it's not.
Okay.
It's not among their best. Okay, and I'm not disagreeing with anybody when they say that. I'm just saying that this is the least Star Trek. Okay, so the chat says that they wouldn't be ranked because it's not a Galaxy Quest wouldn't be ranked because it's not a Star Trek movie. Guess what? Section 31 is not a Star Trek movie either. They literally have as much.
It is.
It's not. All right. It's really not. The only association you have with Star Trek here is
so
the name Section 31. And we don't even know if this was the elite squad. We don't know if this was the best squad. We don't know if this was the ones that they were expecting to get killed off. Like this could have been the Buster squad of Section 31.
So by your logic, is Spaceballs a Star Trek movie?
Is it a Star Wars movie?
Star Trek. They make fun of a ton of Star Trek in that movie. Is it a Star Trek movie?
No, but it's great.
Then Galaxy Quest isn't either. But this is. Regardless of the fact that they don't have the things that you look for in a Star Trek movie, it takes place in that universe. They use that technobabble. They introduce characters that have been in Star Trek shows, right? And it wasn't just Michelle. There were others. They introduced characters that are in Star Trek shows, and they use the same type of technology. They use all of that because it is a Star Trek movie. And I agree with the chat. This is in that bottom 4. Now, can 14 movies, this is the real question, can 14 movies of a series all be good? Absolutely they could be. These aren't. Okay, Star Trek has had some stinkers, but you could have 14 and it could be the bottom of that list and still be good. That's not the case with Star Trek. Star Trek has had some what were you thinkings? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, some of that is age. Some of that is, the culture that was going on. I think that, in my opinion, of the bottom 4, 2 of them are older Star Trek movies. And, maybe you throw in something like Nemesis in there, which had lots of issues, even though there are parts of it that are very good. So you definitely have, maybe the only way this sneaks into that next 5, that middle 5, is if you went like Star Trek 1, 3, 5, and Nemesis. And maybe there's a case that it's better than all 4 of those, right? Maybe. But it
really?
would have
Search
been
for Spock?
Huh?
Really? Search for Spock?
Search
in your
for
bottom?
Spock?
That's in your bottom 4?
Search for Spock is... when we get around to watching the original series movies again, Search for Spock is rough. Search for Spock is really rough.
Enterprise, I'm not prepared to rank all 14
I am shocked
right now.
That 2 of the first 3 Star Trek movies were
bad.
Star Trek 1 and Search for Spock, and we got more.
I'll agree. We are very, very fortunate that the motion picture didn't kill the entire franchise. All right. Motion picture is in my bottom 4. It might be the worst of all time for me. All right. And again, we'd probably have to watch through these again to actually re-rank them. It's been a long time since I watched them. But
let's talk about what you so I've offered my opinion. What is it that you liked about Section 31? Because you're coming at this of, I enjoyed Section 31. So what is it specifically that you liked about Section 31?
I liked I liked the Easter eggs, if you will, and when I say Easter eggs, they weren't hidden. They weren't really necessarily Easter eggs. What am I trying to say? I like the references. Okay, the fact that we got a sneak peek into the lore of the captain of the Enterprise C. Okay, I thought that you and I talked about that very, very early when we were talking about the lore. I even said to you, do you expect there to be story about Enterprise C? And you said no, probably not. But I had heard at that time that Rachel Garrett's character was going to appear. I loved that. That to me, in your words, that to me was a fan service moment. Okay, like
absolutely
connecting the universes and getting Rachel Garrett. All right, and I hear what you're saying, Benani. That right there proves it's a Star Trek movie. When I say it's not a Star Trek movie, and I want to answer Bubba's question. But let me address this. When I say it's not a Star Trek movie, I think in my mind it's kind of exactly what Bubba was talking about a second ago. It is not what we expect from a Star Trek movie. It exists in the Star Trek universe, all right? But this is the first one that didn't surround itself by a flagship starship and a bridge crew with defined roles. This was like a Han Solo spin-off movie. Okay, like Solo was to Star Wars. This was a spin-off. So when I say it's not a Star Trek film, let me be very clear. It is obviously existing within Star Trek. I don't mean that it's not a Star Trek movie. It's not a Star Trek movie in the sense that all 14 others were. This was a spin-off. This is like Young Sheldon to Big Bang Theory. It was a completely different, separate story with totally different things that happen to exist in the same universe. That's what I mean. And that's why the cast of this movie was afraid that fans weren't going to like it. They came out early.
I don't think that's why they were afraid fans were not going to like it.
Well, that's what they said anyway. All right. That's what they said, is that this is so not like the feeling of Star Trek that we're afraid fans aren't going to recognize it. And I believe that was an accurate prediction. I feel like fans didn't recognize it. All right.
So using your logic, and there is a split here. Okay. But using your logic, fans should have rejected Deep Space Nine.
I rejected Deep Space Nine when it was new. And yes, I do think that fans could have, and maybe even did in the very beginning, but Deep Space Nine overcame because it was so good. All right? It was so good. But yes.
If I was coming at you with, I don't like this because it's not about a bridge crew, it doesn't feel Star Trek-y enough to me, I didn't say any of that. Okay. I have fundamental issues with this movie, not because it doesn't feel like Star Trek, not because there wasn't enough Star Trek, not because there wasn't a bridge crew, not because there wasn't a ship that we built around. None of that.
Yours is with the movie itself, the story.
Mine is with the movie itself.
Well, let's transition to that
and
here
I
in a
agree.
moment.
But the tag into Garrett was fantastic.
I love that.
Right? The way that they find and wrap in Michelle Yeoh's character, fantastic.
Yeah.
Right? The way that the introduction to the movie, right, where they introduce how she became Empress.
Yeah.
All of that was decent.
You know, funny you say that. That was a very questionable scene for me. Okay. I actually read an article about this, and I agreed with the author of this article very much, that opening scene made it really, really hard for her to be the hero of this movie. Okay, like, hey, by the way, here's
is she the hero of the movie?
Well, that's a good question. Don't know. Here's Philippa Georgiou, who murdered her entire family just to gain power. But by the way, she's going to be the linchpin to this supposed hero squad that saves the galaxy. It was an awkward scene for me. Okay, it was very very awkward.
Okay, so let's go back. Is Q a hero?
The anti-hero is, and I
How
hear
about
what you're
Garrick?
saying. Huh?
How about Garrick?
Oh, for sure. He's a great villain. He's a villain, though. He's a villain.
That's what I said. Is he a hero?
No, he's a villain.
Okay. So it is possible to have someone who is very clearly a villain
Yeah.
do things that reach a positive outcome, because we saw Garrick do things to help the Federation win the war.
Yeah.
Right?
I get it.
But he was very clearly a villain or an anti-hero.
Yeah.
Right?
And by the way,
So
I just said, it's not that I just struggled with that a little bit, because I feel like if this was an action movie that was reaching out to a new audience, all right, which I think is what they were trying to do, then that opening scene would have been very confusing for a lot of people. All right. What people who are new to this movie or new to this franchise doesn't understand, or wouldn't understand rather, is the transformation that Empress Georgiou experienced under the captaincy or the guiding wing of Michael Burnham. Now, whether or not you like Discovery or not is not that's not a conversation that we're having.
Right. So,
but the relationship between Philippa and Michael changed her.
If you take this movie and you see nothing else about Philippa Georgiou, and they don't have that beginning part, now maybe they could have interspersed it throughout the movie, but I think that would have broken up the movie in a bad way. But let's say that they didn't have that part and you haven't watched any Philippa Georgiou. How would you know that she was actually
this bad guy,
morally neutral?
Yeah. Well, that was the next point that a lot of audience was very dissatisfied with, was that Empress Georgiou, when they find her at the bar, did not care about this mission, did not care about the Federation, didn't care about the universe. As a matter of fact, was very briefly and admittedly poorly described, Bubba Joe, that she had already done a stint with Section 31 and left. Like, I thought that was interesting. When we left her in Discovery, she was going to Section 31. This movie finds her, however many years later, done, bored. She left Section 31. All right?
She walked through the gateway to tomorrow or whatever that is. She didn't leave Section 31 and disappear.
No. When she was with Discovery, she went through that gateway to be restored back to a time when she could work. Right then and there, she went to Section 31. Like, they picked her up, they plucked her out of the timeline right then and there. All right? This movie even
How do you know that?
I don't remember how I know that, but that is definitely clearly stated somewhere. Okay, look, see, Raj says I'm correct. Section 31 plucked her out of the timeline literally right then and there. And it even says at the beginning of Section 31's film that she did a stint with Section 31 and then left or disappeared.
Well, she did a stint with she did stuff with Section 31 in Discovery.
And then just went off, okay? Disappeared. And we also know that this happened post her walking through the gateway of Tomorrowland forever. Gateway of Forever.
Sure.
So, but anyway, my point comes back to she was indifferent. Didn't want to do it for the right reason. She just did it because she was bored. All right. Which I know that Star Trek fans also had trouble with. She participated in this mission because she was bored. And it wasn't until she was exposed to this weapon that she actually then gained a personal interest. Now, you talk about the action elements of the film. You talk about the movie itself, the story. I believe that there is one character, and I do feel like I stand alone in this. I feel like they told Philippa Georgiou's story sufficiently. A lot of people say that they didn't. They say there's no character development. And I would agree with many of the other characters. There was a surprising lack of character development with almost all the other characters. The one that they did well with was Philippa Georgiou. We got a lot of flashbacks. We got a lot of insight into her early days as Empress. We even got a love story, okay? That is character development. We got to know Philippa Georgiou better than we have ever gotten to see her up until this point. That's why I'm surprised when people talk about the character development. Now, you're talking about Rachel Garrett, fine. You're talking about, the guy that died 5 minutes into it. I don't even remember his name. Chef or Zeph. That's honestly a character I think I would have enjoyed getting to know more. He was funny. Okay. You talk about Fuzz. That was a terrible character. Didn't like that character at all. The tiny little robot inside the Vulcan body. That was actually quite dumb. I didn't like that at all. But
at the end where we get his wife, isn't that funny?
That final scene, Bubba, don't paint me into that corner. I have told you my opinion on that final scene. That final scene was the absolute worst final scene of any film or series that I have ever seen. Okay, that is 12 minutes that the movie should have gone without. As a matter of fact, that scene left the taste in the mouth that probably taints a large percentage of people against this movie. If that scene had not occurred, I think less people would have been angry about it. That scene was so cheesy, was so manufactured, was so dumb and fake and predictable and stupid. That was a stupid scene. You remove that from the film, it automatically gets two letter grades boost. All right.
So there's an interesting comment that I want to talk to for a second. And I take issue with one of the things that is said here, but I think this is worth pointing out. So Admiral Pegasus goes, I've been listening for a couple of minutes and not once have I heard what makes Star Trek good. It's the writers. I agree.
Sure.
The writers are what makes Star Trek good. The writers know how to tell a story. If they know how to follow the storyline, then you can have Star Trek. Agree. New Trek has had some questionable writing. That I disagree with. I think that the writing for Lower Decks, I think the writing for season 1 of Prodigy, I think the writing for all of Lower Decks, season 1 of Prodigy, I think the writing for Strange New Worlds, and I think the writing for the first Kelvin movie, all of those are fantastic.
Agreed.
Now, you want to say Kelvin 2 and 3? Okay.
I liked Kelvin 2.
It may not be as good as other things.
I like Kelvin 2.
The writing of Discovery was better than it was bad. So it had more good than bad, in my opinion, although there were some cringe things there. So I agree. The writers make Star Trek. I mean, that is the reason that Star Trek fans try to separate themselves from Star Wars fans, which again, I think is silly. But the reason that some people want to do that is because they feel that Star Trek sticks to a narrative and a vocabulary and science, and the writing is much stronger than it is in other fantasy movies, right? That's their big claim to fame. So I agree with that point. The writing in this movie was not good. Like, it just wasn't. And that's one of the big flaws here. That's one of the big problems. So I totally understand that problem, right? I get that that's part of what happened. The reason that you have bad writing, or one of the reasons you can have bad writing, is when you go from a TV show to a movie to a TV show to a movie. Who's going to be in it? How are we going to do it? Do we want... That can lead to a mismatch of bad writing and bad storytelling. And that's what this feels like. When watching the movie, it feels like we went from here to here to here, and it's like they jammed some stuff in the middle that was, well, we got to make it a movie as opposed to a pilot episode. You know, it could have been, if you'd have taken a bunch of that junk in the middle and just added a little bit into, you know, having there be a traitor, right? You could have had this be a pretty good 45 to 50-minute pilot, and it would have been a big kicking off point. But it went from a series to a movie to a series to a movie over the course of like 4 or 5 years. I think they were talking about doing this show.
Yeah.
And it got interrupted by the strikes. It got interrupted by COVID. It had all of those things working against it. That is completely fair to say we got started and stopped and started and stopped, and we had change of crew and change of writers and change of scope, and that led to this mess. Okay, I can accept that, but it is a mess.
The commentary from the chat predominantly agrees with you, Bubba Joe, that the film overall left a lot to be desired. And when I say that I feel like the film had a lot to be desired, that is not me admitting that I didn't like the film. All right. This was not a great film, and I never said that it was. I simply came out and said that I did enjoy it. I don't think it was as bad as what a lot of people say. Now, if you're dissecting this thing and you're breaking it down and you're looking for errors in script and you're looking for intelligent, connection of stories and looking for something unique and at the same time the same as what Star Trek has always been, then I can understand why this wasn't your thing. I think what I'm saying about the fact that I enjoyed it is because there were a couple of fan service moments. I do not think that the writing was great. All right, I'm not suggesting that, Bubba Joe. I do think that the story was weak. I think that I got to know more about Rachel Garrett. I got to learn more about Philippa Georgiou, and those were two things attached to lore that I very much enjoyed. The action I enjoyed. Spectre is talking about, the lens flares and the sci-fi effects. Well, I like that stuff. Okay, those were good. I like that. But I do feel like okay, I saw somebody make a comment in the chat like there was character development on Melly. Really? How? She was dead in 10 minutes. Sorry, spoiler. I don't understand that comment. So, and Zeph, same kind of thing. I wish we would have gotten more on him. The story itself was somewhat predictable. I don't think that there was a shock and awe moment. All right. Except for maybe when they revealed who the actual villain was, but I don't think it was a stretch at that point. All right. Dave Hart says, so DJz likes Fast and Furious in space. You know what? Bubba Joe kind of made that comment originally. If this is just simply an action movie in space, fine. If that's what it's going to be. And I think that's what we got.
They missed there.
I don't know. You're wanting intelligent, right? Does Fast and the Furious have intelligent writing, intelligent dialogue?
An action movie doesn't have a 40-minute break of no action.
Okay. That's fair.
Like, if it's an action movie, be an action movie. Embrace the fact that you're going to be an action movie set in the Star Trek universe. Okay? I mean, that's a lot of people's complaint about the Kelvinverse. Right? There's a big people that are complaining about the Kelvinverse is they think it's an action movie or a 90210 of Star Trek.
Yeah.
If you don't like that, that's fine. But I don't think that's what's happening there. I think they're just taking a new spin on characters of actors and actresses that happen to be younger. There is going to be more action in a movie with younger actors and actresses than there could have been for Shatner, who was like 90 when they filmed the last movie.
And is still only 92. All right.
That's right.
Betty Hill says it was Guardians of the Furious, and that's the point that I'm trying to make. Swag says they wouldn't make Fast and Furious 32 if it wasn't popular. And that's my point. I think I see this in the chat. We expect more from Star Trek. And I get that. I'm empathetic with that, and I feel that. That's why I say this wasn't, with my finger quotes in the air, this is not Star Trek. This is not Star Trek in the way that we wanted it to be. This is, in my opinion, another engine, another mechanic for them to try to find a newer, younger fan base to become interested in a franchise whose audience is growing older. Okay? Now, you can be offended by that or whatever you want, but you look at Prodigy, all right? Some people didn't like Prodigy. I saw this in the chat. It was too geared towards kids. Well, yeah, that's what it was for. Okay? That's what it was. Lower Decks, the comedy piece. This brand new Tawny Newsome series that we're going to get is going to be Star Trek, but not like any Star Trek you guys have ever seen. Okay? I'm looking forward to that. They are trying to reach new people to hopefully be able to bring them back in to generate some interest in new projects, because you're right. The 14 films that we've got, the newest one outside of Section 31, the newest one is 10 years old now. All right? They've got to do something to save this franchise from dying off. And they're going to do that by reaching out to new people with new ideas. And this one is not going to land with Star Trek fans. I would be very curious to see some focus group data and some testing data. What were the opinions of people who had never seen a single episode of Star Trek? I would be very curious. Now, it probably is still not the best action film. There was a lot of problems there, okay? I'm not saying that. But I wonder if this film will still achieve its goal of bringing new people into the franchise, and I bet that it does.
No.
I think it will.
I think that Lower Decks and Prodigy and Strange New Worlds are going to be far more successful at bringing new fans into the franchise than
I agree.
this movie will, because this movie is bad.
Well, I agree that they will have better success at bringing people into the franchise because they also have 100 times more screen time hours than this movie had. You've got 5 seasons of Lower Decks. You've got 3 seasons of Strange New Worlds under your belt. You've got 5 seasons of Discovery, which is questionable. By the way, I saw somebody say that the 5th season of Discovery was the worst ever. I disagree. I think it was the best ever. I loved that story with Mullen Locke, and it's just a personal thing. But and then you look at this new comedy that Tawny Newsome is writing. I think that's going to be great. You look at all of this stuff that they are doing. All of it is out of the box. All of it's out of the box, and I think that is
yet
necessary.
we spent about 20 minutes talking about why Star Trek 4 hasn't happened.
The fans still want it, Bubba, but they do need to reach out to new fans.
Again, so which fans?
New ones. Needs to be new. Listen, the entire Kelvin universe happened to try to revitalize the project. I mean, it did. Kelvin, new cast, new crew, young stars, that happened to try to revitalize the franchise.
Yes.
So, I mean, mission accomplished as far as Christopher Pine goes. You know, it and Paramount. So I understand why they're trying to do it again. They're not going to hit on every single project. Not, as you mentioned, not every single project is going to be a win. This one was wrought with production problems and timing errors.
Vanatia, I'm taking a stab at that name, had summarized this exactly right. Still needs to be good. In order to get people to watch something, it still has to be good.
Still has to be good, and it still wasn't. I get that. So, you know, I understand why the fans weren't a big deal. Let me ask. Cruzito said Kelvin was about old characters, so to speak. Okay, fine. You had Giorgio. You had Rachel Garrett, which I think was fun. Those were probably the only 2 that had any attachment to the existing Star Trek universe. Was there anybody else that did have any attachment to the universe, Bubba? I'm not sure that there was.
I'm thinking.
I'm not entirely sure. Putt says, "Man, you got to give it to DJz defending this turd of a movie." Oh, Putz, you're so grumpy these days, man. You're so grumpy these days. No one gets to see it. I get to see it. Is it possible I just enjoyed the movie? Am I allowed to enjoy the movie? Is that okay with you?
You are. You know what? You are allowed to enjoy bad movies.
Fine. All right. I thought Rachel Garrett was great. Okay. J-Babe says, as an older fan, who is Garrett?
You're
Don't
not
recall
wrong.
her.
I liked the throwback. I thought she was a little they played her very well.
Yes, she was quirky and great.
But she didn't do anything. Like she spent the entire movie trying to be a stick in the mud.
Which is
again what you kind of expected.
Well, yeah, but no, she embraced her chaos there at the end. All right, she embraced her chaos. She was a chaos junkie there at the end. And that's what I'm saying. I think we did get a little bit of glimpse into Rachel Garrett. As a matter of fact, when we talk about the early lives of captains, all right, we've seen a glimpse into Picard as a younger man.
Ever had a conversation about the early lives of captains?
No, what?
You said, when we talk about the early lives of captains, like we've had this discussion.
No, I don't mean you and
times.
I'm saying the Star Trek fandom has had a little experience or a little introduction to Picard as a young lieutenant. We've had a little bit into Kirk as a young man entering the academy. Now we got to see a little bit about Rachel Garrett, and it makes sense. I understand why she made it to be the captain of the Enterprise.
But the difference is that we got Rachel Garrett for like an episode, and now in this movie, whereas Picard was arguably the main character of a series that ran for 7 seasons, and we got to see him early in his career like a couple of times. Like you're talking about something that we like. That's not like, yes, if you have a character you've fallen in love with and you're like, I identify with this character, I want to see what makes him tick. Right? How did his heart get injured? Oh, well, let's go see that story.
Sure.
How did he not stay stuck as a lieutenant? Let's see that story. Right? So these are interesting things because we identify with this character. You're making Rachel Garrett out to be like this capstone figure in all of Star Trek. Like she's one of the most important things to happen in Star Trek.
No.
And we got to see her. We got to see a little bit of her backstory.
No, I said this before this ever happened. Before you even knew that Rachel Garrett was going to be in this movie, I said, I'm excited to know more about the Lost Era. We know nothing about the Enterprise C. You're right. We've seen it in one episode. But we've got movies about the Enterprise, and then the A, and then the B, then the D, and the E. We have nothing about Enterprise C.
I think you're wrong.
We have nothing about the Enterprise C. We have one episode.
B we don't have anything on. The C is in
that's
Generations.
That's Rachel Garrett's Enterprise. Wait, is it we know very little about the B and the C. Yes, C was Rachel Garrett's Enterprise. Okay.
C was in The Next Generation, and then its maiden flight was in Generations.
B was in Generations, says engineer, which I may be wrong on. I don't know. I'm reading the chat now. I do know that Garrett was C's captain, and we don't have anything.
That I agree with.
We don't have anything. So I was excited. I was more excited about getting information on Enterprise C, which, by the way, we did not get, but we did get a familiar tie to that. And maybe that's why I'm more forgiving of this, Putz, because I came into this movie, even when we saw the trailer, all right, when we did our first show about this months ago, one of my big excitement moments was we were going to learn more about the C. And we didn't see a whole lot about the C, but we did learn a little bit about her captain.
All right, so
and I like that.
I'm sitting down, chat. You are correct.
Ha! Where's the button? Where's the freaking button? Yeah,
there is a problem with this timeline.
Well,
because Kirk and Scott and Chekhov were not retired at that point in time, and yet they make a big deal about them having been retired for a significant amount of time, and then they came back as this honorary voyage. So I'm going to defend my position that it had to be the C in order to make that statement correct. But you are all correct. It is identified as the Enterprise B in lore that is that ship. So it's only a little broken.
Well, there arguably was, if we were talking about this too on the last show, if you want to pick at it a little bit, if there's a thread you want to pick at, it was the fact that our villain, San, did not change his age, even though Giorgio had been time traveling, but like they still appeared at the same age, but more time. I think that when I was reading the timeline of this, my understanding was almost 70 more years should have passed for San than had for Giorgio, but details, right? But anyway, maybe that's why I'm more forgiving, is because we did get a little bit of lore connectivity there. Maybe the movie was bad, but I got to see some Rachel Garrett. I was good with that.
I loved the spoiler of, not spoiler, maybe it's a spoiler, but I loved seeing to pick some things out of, again, a different universe. I loved seeing the Ghost, which is a ship, in Rogue One, and I loved seeing it in Rise of Skywalker.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I loved seeing this character call back, in this case, a ship. That was fantastic. Rogue One is a great movie, even though it has it in there, and I get to be excited about that. Rise of Skywalker is a terrible movie, even though it has that moment that made me excited.
And I can get behind that. If this was ultimately a bad movie, I'm fine with people feeling that way. there were some points. All right. As a matter of fact, I'm going to probably, this may or may not be surprising, but I was kind of disappointed with what they put into Philippa Georgiou, which is more that we can talk about later. I mean, let me rephrase. That's not what I'm trying to say. I feel like they didn't bring us the Georgiou that we knew and loved. Does that make sense? I think too much time had passed, maybe. And Michelle Yeoh had done too many other projects. It didn't feel like the same Empress Georgiou. But anyway, there's a lot more that we could talk about in this, and I know that we're running short on time, so we're going to get ready to wrap this up.
We are out of time.
Yeah, we're going to get ready to wrap this thing up. That all being said, Section 31 is now streaming on Paramount Plus. If you have not yet watched it, I don't know that I really don't think that we've given a ton of spoilers here. I don't think. I think you could still go watch and enjoy this Star Trek movie.
That you can't do.
All right, go watch and enjoy this Star Trek movie, and know that maybe, just like content inside Star Trek Fleet Command, maybe it's not for you. All right, that doesn't necessarily mean that nobody enjoyed it. I would love to see
now,
more.
Let's be clear. Okay, DJ, if you'd have come to me and said, I loved this movie, X, Y, and Z, I'd have been like, you're allowed to love whatever movie you love. And so if someone in the chat's like, I thought this movie was fantastic, great. You can like poorly executed movies. There are lots of those out there that people love, right?
Yeah.
But so if you meet someone's like, I liked Section 31 and I liked it because of X, Y, and Z.
I've
now,
explained
if they say,
that for
I
an
like
hour.
Section 31 because the writing was fantastic.
Well, no, I didn't say that.
No. I'm saying if somebody said that in the chat, that is factually incorrect. That is something that I would have an argument with them about. But you're allowed to like whatever movie you like for whatever reason you want to like it. That's allowed. That's something that I think is not said enough. And I want to make sure it is emphasized. People are allowed to like whatever movies they like for whatever reason they like, right? That's okay. So I just want to be clear. People come into the chat or into the Discord or wherever else and they say, this movie was awesome because I got to see Rachel Garrett. And you want to say that the movie is awesome because that was the one thing you wanted from the movie and you got that delivered. Fine. You get to like this movie for the reasons that you want to like this movie. You get to dislike the movie for the reasons that we can dislike the movie. So I think that you are taking a devil's advocate position here so that we can have something to talk about, which is fine.
Come on, Bubba.
But I want to make sure, and this is something that is kind of personal to me. People are allowed to dislike things and move on. Okay. They're allowed to like things and move on. You do not have to yell at somebody because they did like something or didn't like something. You do not have to throw them out of the Discord. You don't have to. Let's measure some tolerance. I think this movie was terrible, but if I met somebody who was like, I love this movie, I became a Star Trek fan because of it, I'd be like, hey, we need more Star Trek fans. Like, I think you'll find that there are better Star Trek movies, but hey, I'm glad you're here.
That's exactly right. And with that, we will get ready to wrap up our show today. Obviously, a very huge and special thank you to my friend and co-host from back in the day. Ladies and gentlemen, his name is Bubba Joe. Thank you. And of course, our guest today was absolutely phenomenal. Very much looking forward to seeing her in literally a week. You guys be sure to go check out her book, her short film. That is Dr. Erin MacDonald, and she is absolutely just a delight. And for any of you going to be traveling to Miami, hopefully we'll get a chance to introduce you to her. For those of you going to be on the ship, you will absolutely have an opportunity to run into her and share food and drink with her. It's going to be an absolutely amazing time. And I should remind you, for those of you maybe a little bit jealous or left out of some of the cruise talk that we've had, I will remind you that Star Trek The Cruise 9 has already been announced. We'll be bringing you more information on that as time becomes available. If you would like to book early on Star Trek The Cruise 9, we will, of course, be back. Bubba, I revealed, I think yesterday or maybe a week ago, I don't remember if I did it a week ago. I know we talked about it yesterday, that I have already secured our promotional giveaway cabin for Star Trek The Cruise 9 as well. So yet again, our audience will have an opportunity to join in the shenanigans that will be on Royal Caribbean's Star Trek cruise coming up in the year 2026. Bubba Joe, big question in the chat. Are you going to go on Star Trek The Cruise 9? He's thinking, for those of you who can't see, there's smoke coming out of his ears. Eyes are rolling back in his head.
Talking about my ears. I have headphones on. How can there be things coming out of my ears?
Oh my good Lord, Bubba Joe. I've missed it. Yeah, he's told me that he prefers to be on land. All right, so. Oh, wait, there you go. What's that? Hit the wrong button.
I'm a big land fan. That is for sure.
You land lover. All right, guys. You want the cruise theme song? We should do that because we're getting ready to bounce on out. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being a part of our live studio audience today. We thank all of you for being here. It was a great show, and I am so happy that Bubba Joe has agreed to come back and bring this show to life. It is still Talking Trek, but at the same time, outside of Star Trek Fleet Command, exploring and learning and diving more into the Star Trek universe of today, and bringing you closer to the stories, the writing, the studios, and the cast that we know and love. And we'll be doing more of that this coming week, as Talking Trek is officially in the program of events that was released by Entertainment Cruise Productions today. Spectre shared that with me earlier. There we are, Bubba Joe. We are in black and white. Well, it's actually blue and white. We're blue and white in the program guide. We've got 2 shows on the schedule in the Schooner Bar, so very excited about that on the ship this year. And our special surprise guest will be revealed in due time. We'll look forward to seeing all of you guys coming up this Saturday in Miami. You guys be sure to come down and check it out. My name is UltimatDJz. His name is Bubba Joe, and we are Talking Trek. Registered trademark and recorded in front of a live studio audience for distribution across podcast platforms everywhere. We'll catch you on the next one, everybody. Good night.